A pale dawn crept into the sky over the great city of King's Landing, the kind of dawn that promised no warmth from the sun. Only a reluctant glow struggling to break through low gray clouds. The chill in the air brought with it the scent of the Blackwater Bay and the stinging memory of tension that coiled through the capital like a serpent. Within the Red Keep, the corridors seemed quieter than usual, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath in anticipation. This day would mark a shift none had foreseen, one that would unravel delicate webs of ambition and deceit, spun over many months and years. Along the torchlit gallery, torches guttered in their brackets, the flares of fire making flickering shadows dance upon the floor. Guards stood at their posts with spears in hand and uncertain looks in their eyes. There had been rumors whispered in the barracks, hushed at first, then louder, until men began to look at each other with suspicion. Some said the master of coin himself had been accused of treachery, but the wise among them dismissed such thoughts. Littlefinger was indispensable, a cunning man, who served not just the crown but his own interests, always blending the two, so that no one could quite tell the difference. Rumor had it that he could spin gold out of air, or illusions of gold, which in King's Landing often served the same purpose. It was unthinkable that such a man, one of the small council's most clever minds, could be undone by mere talk. Yet the rumors persisted. Down in a cold chamber near the dungeons, a sparse room ordinarily used for small, discreet meetings, Lord Eddard Stark stood near a narrow window. He had barely slept in the last few nights. Dark circles shadowed his gray eyes, and his jaw was set with a grim determination that hardened his normally kind features. He stared beyond the dagger-thin slit of a window, to the city below, mind racing with the revelations he had recently uncovered. The Eddard Stark who left Winterfell believed in justice, in the honorable tradition of truth revealed. Now he had discovered that in King's Landing, truth was a currency dealt in shadows, and justice was never a certainty. Yet what he held in his hands now felt incontrovertible, a damning ledger, a secret letter that had found its way to him through an ally he never suspected, and a single scrap of a private agreement bearing Petyr Baelish's small, neat signature. Even in the face of deception, Ned trusted his instincts, and they screamed at him that he had discovered something of monstrous implications. His hand still trembled as he recalled the moment the final piece of evidence was laid in front of him. It was a letter from Littlefinger to Sir Janos Slynt, the commander of the City Watch. In it, Baelish promised considerable payments of coin in exchange for certain small adjustments in how the watch was to be deployed on a certain night. The letter detailed the precise timing of a planned street riot, the timing that would give Baelish's men the freedom to slip past the confusion and enact a far more sinister scheme. At first, Ned could hardly believe his eyes. He had long suspected Baelish capable of schemes. Petyr had boasted once that he admired chaos, even thrived in it. But Eddard never imagined he would see proof this blatant, one that tied the Master of Coin to a potential coup against the rightful hand of the king, or worse yet, the entire monarchy. Lady Catelyn had known Petyr Baelish as a childhood friend. To her, he was Littlefinger, a name she used with reluctant affection when speaking of him. But Ned had never seen the man as anything but an opportunist. Still, to see it all spelt out was sobering. The sum Baelish had promised was substantial, drawn from vaults that should have been under the crown's guard. The letter was sealed with Petyr's mockingbird sigil, a brazen seal for such an incriminating act. But perhaps Baelish never expected it to fall into the hands of a Stark. Footsteps echoed outside the chamber, drawing Ned from his troubled reverie. Lord Varys, soft-footed as always, slipped into the room. His lavender-scented robes and unnerving gaze made the small space feel tighter still. He inclined his bald head in a respectful nod, then spoke in a whisper that seemed to coil around Ned's ears. "My Lord Hand, we have done as you asked. He does not suspect yet. You must be cautious. Petyr is never truly unguarded, not even when alone." Ned could only nod. He knew Littlefinger's cunning all too well. Barry stepped closer, placing one hand lightly on Ned's forearm, in a gesture meant to reassure. "You must act swiftly," the spy master continued. "We do not know how many in the City Watch remain truly loyal to you. Some might have already been bribed with his silver. He excels at making enemies into friends with the weight of coin. The weariness in Ned's voice was clear as he murmured, "A man who fights with gold takes up arms faster than any soldier promised only honor. But the king must see this treachery. I will face Petyr, but not in secret. Let him stand before Robert, the small council, the realm." Varys' eyes narrowed, but he gave no argument. He merely bowed his head, and the corners of his mouth curved into an enigmatic smile. Ned could not tell whether the Master of Whisperers was truly pleased, or simply enjoying another twist in the game. "A bold move," Varys said quietly. "I will ensure certain important figures are in attendance. The rest, I leave in your hands." With that, Varys slipped out of the room, leaving Ned alone once more. For a moment, Ned felt a wave of doubt crash over him. He wished Catelyn were here to share this burden, but she had already left the city, carrying her own suspicions north. Sansa and Arya were still in King's Landing, and the thought of them being in danger should he fail in this endeavor made his stomach clench. Still, he had no choice. Petyr Baelish was a cancer that had to be cut out before it spread any further through the heart of the realm. A few hours passed, and the last glimmers of morning light bled into the corridors of the keep. Ned took a breath, then climbed the steps to the throne room. The hall soared overhead, massive pillars creating elongated shadows across the floor. His footsteps echoed, calling the attention of guards, courtiers, and hangers-on. Word had spread that the hand of the king was to bring forth an accusation against a member of the small council. Though exactly who that might be, or what the crime entailed, was a matter of wild speculation. Men whispered with anxious fascination, and the ladies of the court exchanged knowing looks, as though each believed she already knew the truth behind the scandal. King Robert Baratheon slouched upon the iron throne, his massive frame draped in a lion's pelt, a half-empty flagon of wine resting on the arm of the seat. His eyes were bloodshot, and his cheeks ruddy from drink. He looked bored, though as Ned stepped forward, the king's gaze sharpened slightly. To Robert's right stood Queen Cersei, her emerald eyes narrowed, lips pressed in a thin line of disapproval. A small circle of courtiers, including Grand Maester Pycelle and Lord Renly, waited behind them. Standing off to the side in the gloom was Varys, hands folded innocently within the sleeves of his robes. Littlefinger was already in the hall, having been summoned without explanation. He wore an elegant doublet of black velvet embroidered with the silver mockingbird, the very sigil that had sealed the damning letter. He looked completely at ease, the faintest trace of a smile curving his lips, as though he expected to find entertainment in some minor fiasco. Whatever flicker of curiosity shone in his pale green eyes, it vanished beneath a careful mask of composure the instant Ned Stark approached the throne. Ned bowed before Robert, though his movements were stiff. "Your Grace," he began, voice echoing across the high hall, "I come before you with grave news. A betrayal has been uncovered within these walls, one that threatens the stability of the realm and the integrity of the crown's governance." "Many." The king looked intrigued yet irritated. "By the gods, Ned, let us have it," he growled. "I've heard nothing but rumors these past days, and I'm in no mood for riddles. Who stands accused?" Without turning his head, Ned gestured toward Littlefinger. "Petyr Baelish, Master of Coin. I accuse him of treason." A palpable gasp rippled through the court. Petyr stood utterly still, though Ned saw the faint twitch in his cheek, the flicker of something startled in his eyes. Then, like a performer adjusting to an unexpected line, Littlefinger inclined his head and let out a short laugh. "Treason, my lord? That's quite a charge. I can only assume someone has filled your head with fantasies. Could it be your dear friend Lord Varys, lurking in the shadows?" He said it lightly, almost as though mocking the notion. Varys offered a small smile, no direct response, but Ned pressed on. "You and I both know there's no fantasy here, Lord Baelish. I hold in my hands documents that prove your dealings with Sir Janos Slynt. Deals that would see the City Watch used to sow chaos and topple the hand of the king, myself, if certain conditions were not met. You have misappropriated crown funds for bribes and subterfuge. You have undermined the king's peace to further your own ambitions." "Wow." Robert's frown deepened, and he rubbed the back of his neck, his broad fingers rasping against coarse black hair. "Is this true?" he demanded, turning a bloodshot gaze on Petyr. "Or are we chasing shadows like a pack of fools?" Littlefinger spread his hands, as though in supplication. "I would never betray the crown. My entire life I have served House Tully, and then House Arryn, and now your grace and the realm. If there is any paper bearing my name, it's a forgery. The lords of the realm know how easily a seal might be copied." Ned's jaw clenched at the man's slippery words. "The proof is unmistakable," he said, and then he signaled. On cue, 2 silent guards brought forth the letter, laying it before the king. The seal, broken but still visible, bore the mockingbird pressed in black wax. Next to it lay copies of ledgers, detailing the suspicious withdrawals of coin from the royal treasury. Ned could almost hear the hush that fell over the throne room as Robert cast his eyes over the items. A tense moment stretched as the king looked from the evidence to Petyr, and then to Ned. Robert, for all his faults, had a core sense of directness that could not be dulled by wine. His brow knitted and fury lit in his eyes. "You dare bribe my city watch?" he demanded, voice echoing. "Are you mad, Baelish?" Petyr took a slow breath. Ned could see him calculating. Perhaps he was weighing how best to spin the story, how to sow doubt in Robert's mind. But Robert, once his temper was roused, was never a man to be easily swayed. Baelish's smirk faltered for the briefest moment. "Your Grace, you cannot believe that I would do this. The letter is a fabrication. Someone has orchestrated these documents to frame me. I suspect it's the Lannisters." "Hold your tongue," Cersei hissed from where she stood. Her voice was cold, and a flicker of anger lit her emerald eyes. She might not be fond of Eddard Stark, but this was a direct accusation against her house. Even she did not appreciate a brazen scapegoating. Petyr bowed his head in an almost contrite gesture. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I meant no offense. I simply see the possibility that Lord Stark has been fed false evidence to remove me from your council. I do deal with coin, after all, and I know many who envy my position." Ned felt his temper flare at the insinuation. "I have no interest in your office, Petyr. I merely wish to serve the king and protect him from those who would use their influence for treason." He looked at Robert. "Your Grace, you know me. My name, my honor. Do you believe I would lie about so grave a matter?" A pregnant pause filled the air. Robert stared at the evidence, brow furrowed. Then he passed it to Pycelle, who fumbled with the pages, adjusting his spectacles. The old maester took his time reading every word, his lips moving silently as though in prayer. "This seal is no forgery," Pycelle said at length, voice trembling. "And the ledgers, they are from the Master of Coin's own records, verified by the crowned scribes." Cersei stepped forward, measuring Baelish with a critical gaze. "What have you to say, Petyr? Are all the scribes bribed as well? Or is the idea that Lord Stark orchestrated a flawless forgery, complete with your personal wax seal and your distinct handwriting?" Petyr glanced around, as though looking for an ally. He found none. Renly Baratheon stood at the back, arms crossed, lips pressed in a tight line. Grand Maester Pycelle looked on the verge of fainting. Varys hovered, silent, but there was no amusement in his eyes now. Only a watchful intelligence. No one rushed to the Master of Coin's defense. Finally, Petyr's hand dropped to the hilt of his dagger, a reflexive motion. Several guards immediately stiffened, leveling their spears in warning. Baelish's fingers froze, then slid away from the weapon. King Robert's anger boiled over. "Guards!" he roared, the veins on his neck bulging. "Seize him!" A trio of gold cloaks moved forward, surrounding Petyr Baelish with spears pointed. Petyr lifted his hands again, a veneer of calm returning to him. Yet in his eyes, Ned saw a flicker of desperation. For a man who thrived in chaos, this was a level of hazard that not even Littlefinger had fully prepared for. Robert rose from the Iron Throne with a grunt and stumbled forward, pushing aside one of the guards to stand face to face with Baelish. The king's breath was thick with wine, but his fury was genuine. "Did you think me so great a fool that I wouldn't see your schemes once exposed? If this is all true, you would have risked my reign to line your own pockets. Nay, to rule from the shadows. You conspired to turn my own city watch against me. Petyr's voice was smooth, though his face had gone somewhat pale. Your Grace, I never meant harm. I had only attempted to secure certain loyalties to protect the throne. Forces beyond your control threaten us from every direction. I sought to ensure you had the advantage, that we had the advantage. Spare me. Robert spat. You do not speak for my advantage or my interests. Treason is treason. The punishment for that is death. Silence. Ned felt the hair on his arm stand up. Even he had not expected Robert's wrath to burn so hot so fast. He had expected maybe a long trial, more posturing. But this was raw fury. Queen Cersei did not object. She stood watching Petyr, expression cold and unyielding. Littlefinger looked at the king and then at Ned, and for a heartbeat, Ned saw the real fear behind his eyes. Petyr Baelish was not a warrior. He had always relied on his wit to slip free from traps. But now the jaws were closing around him in plain sight of the entire court. The weight of the king's justice descended like a drawn sword. Ned stepped forward. Your Grace, he said, a tremor in his voice. Should you wish it, we can hold him in the dungeons until... The king's voice thundered again. I want his head, Ned. I'll not wait for more excuses. How many times have I let lies and twists plague this court? Let the realm see what happens to traitors. Let them know the king does not suffer vipers in his garden. The look Petyr cast then was not at Robert, but at Ned. It was one of hatred and desperation, as though he might blame Ned for not seizing the moment to moderate the king's rage. Yet Ned could not bring himself to intervene further. If Petyr was allowed to speak, to spin more webs, who knew what new chaos might be unleashed? The time for second chances had long passed. Baelish opened his mouth to speak one last time, perhaps to beg for mercy, or to offer some cunning new explanation. But Robert would have none of it. The king bellowed another order, and the guards dragged Baelish away, the shriek of metal on stone echoing as the master of coin's fine boots scraped the floor. Men and women of the court parted in hushed awe, scattering to the edges of the room. Some pressed their hands to their mouths in shock, while others exchanged looks that said they'd always known Petyr Baelish's ambitions ran deeper than mere courtly intrigue. No one openly objected to the king's command. Not a single voice rose in Littlefinger's defense. The hush that followed as he was dragged away was more damning than any formal pronouncement of guilt. Even as the grand doors of the throne room slammed shut behind the guards, Ned felt a chill settle into his bones. He could still scarcely believe how quickly the king had demanded blood. In the north, justice was administered swiftly, but there was custom and solemnity to it. In King's Landing, it seemed, justice could come as violently and unpredictably as the swirl of a storm. Petyr Baelish spent a single night in the dungeons. By morning, Robert had revived from his wine-soaked slumber, only to find his fury unabated. Word spread that the king was determined to make an example of the master of coin. Perhaps the city's populace, starved for any sort of spectacle, latched on to the rumor of a public beheading. The small folk whispered of the cunning lord who had tried to betray the crown. Some insisted Baelish had used black magic or consorted with foreign sorcerers. Others claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Still, the chatter in the cramped alleys and bustling markets was inescapable. Petyr Baelish would die for treason. That day, the sky remained overcast, the sun hiding behind layers of thick cloud. A scaffold was hastily assembled in the outer courtyard of the Red Keep. No grand stage, no sweeping days. Only a simple wooden platform, large enough to accommodate an executioner and a condemned. King Robert insisted on the presence of the court, and so the courtyard was filled with a sea of richly colored silks, polished armor, and a hush broken occasionally by hushed excited murmuring. The gold lions of House Lannister, the crowned stag of Baratheon, even the direwolf sigil of House Stark pinned to the doublets of Ned's men. They all stood in silent witness to the final hours of Petyr Baelish. Ned stood at the forefront, near the king. He could feel the tension knotting his shoulders. To his side, Ser Barristan Selmy, the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, watched with a resigned gravity. Beyond them, Queen Cersei had a strange, distant look on her face, as though she found the proceedings distasteful yet necessary. Joffrey, the crown prince, wore a smirk that made Ned's stomach turn. The boy seemed too eager for violence, too enthralled by the idea of an enemy's blood being spilt. Sansa was not in attendance. Ned had ordered her to remain in her chambers. He did not wish his daughter to witness this grim spectacle. Arya, he could only hope, had done as he asked and stayed away, though it would not surprise him if she was somewhere in the crowd, gazing on in secret. Finally, 2 gold cloaks led Petyr Baelish onto the scaffold. His clothes were soiled and torn, the velvet black doublet from the previous day looking more like a rag clinging to his frame. His face was drawn, and his eyes flickered from one side of the courtyard to the other, as though searching for any last chance at escape. A hush fell over the crowd. Robert stepped forward, his booming voice carrying easily. "Petyr Baelish," called Littlefinger, "Master of Coin, you stand condemned by your own words and by the evidence of your crimes. You sought to use the city watch against the realm, and you misused the crown's coin for your personal ambition. I, Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of my name, King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, sentence you to die." He glanced at Ned. Though custom in the North demanded the man who passed the sentence should swing the sword, Robert was a different sort of king. He gestured to Sir Elyn Payne, the king's justice, who stepped forward with his massive executioner's sword. The crowd pressed in closer. Petyr opened his mouth, trying to speak. Maybe he wanted to deliver a final condemnation, to unmask some secret, or to plea for mercy. Whatever words he formed were lost as Sir Elyn Payne seized him by the hair, forcing his head down onto the block. There was no prayer, no final statement. The silver mockingbird pin was still clinging stubbornly to Petyr's collar, glinting in the half-light of the overcast sun. The sword rose. Ned forced himself to watch. It went against every fiber of his being to stand by while a man was executed in such abrupt manner, even one as treacherous as Baelish, but the realm's justice demanded it. The hush in the courtyard became a collective intake of breath. The sword fell in a single, brutal arc, and Petyr Baelish's head dropped into a waiting basket. A gush of red spattered across the scaffold, and the crowd erupted into a startled mixture of gasps and murmured exclamations. Ned swallowed the bile rising in his throat. He had seen executions before, of course. As Warden of the North, he had administered the king's justice with his own blade. But the swiftness, the lack of solemn preparation, it churned his stomach. This was King's Landing, and for all its finery, it sometimes felt more brutal than the hardest winter in the north. The courtyard began to empty. Men and women turned away, some quick to forget and move on, others pale with horror. King Robert handed his wine cup to a page and strode inside without a backward glance. The hush that lingered felt oppressive, broken only by the shuffle of boots on cobblestones, and the hush of hushed voices. Ned felt the cold wind brush against his face. It seemed to whisper a reminder that, in the Game of Thrones, even the slightest miscalculation could lead to a quick and brutal end. He left the courtyard soon after, ignoring the blood-slick boards of the scaffold and the glances from those around him. He made his way through the winding corridors of the keep and into the solitude of his office, formerly Jon Arryn's, then his. He closed the door behind him and rested his forehead against the wooden panel, eyes squeezed shut. He had done what he came to do. Petyr Baelish was exposed and executed, but the victory felt hollow. How many other secrets had Littlefinger carried with him to the grave? How many future betrayals had been averted, and how many new ones were sowed in that very moment by those looking on, learning from his example? Varys entered quietly, as he always did, a soft presence against the oppressive stillness. Ned turned, weary. "What is it?" he asked, unable to mask the heaviness in his voice. The Master of Whisperers surveyed him with those unsettling eyes. "I bring news and some relief, perhaps. The City Watch has uncovered certain hidden compartments in Littlefinger's manse. Documents that confirm additional bribes, blackmail material on lords and ladies throughout the realm. It is no small trove of secrets." Ned shook his head. He truly did have a plan for everything, didn't he? "There are many who weave conspiracies, my Lord Hand." Petyr Baelish was simply more confident about turning them into profit. Varys paused, that mild smile returning to his lips. But in his haste, he apparently left behind more than he should. It will take time to sift through it all, but we may glean how extensive his network really was. Ned stared out the narrow window, where he could see a sliver of the sky, gray clouds still huddled close. I wonder if in some twisted way he saw this coming, Ned murmured. He always spoke about chaos. Said it was a ladder. Perhaps he believed he would climb to new heights at the cost of his soul. Varys stepped closer, voice low. Not every man who climbs wishes to do so for power alone. Some climb for revenge, for acceptance, or for love. Baelish had his reasons, I'm sure. Whether they were worth the price, we shall never know. Men. A heavy silence wrapped around them. Outside, the city was reeling from the news that one of the highest lords of the court had lost his head. Ned could almost taste the tension in the air. He knew that such a swift and public execution would not go unanswered. Rivals and allies of Littlefinger alike would stir. Some would rejoice at his downfall. Others would curse the day the Master of Coin was taken. But the city, the realm, would move on. They always did. At length, Ned spoke. Send word to the king that I'll oversee a thorough search of all of Baelish's properties. Any funds that can be recovered should be returned to the royal treasury, or to those from whom it was stolen. The crown is already deep in debt. Perhaps this might begin to alleviate some of the burden. Varys inclined his head. It shall be done, my lord hand. With a swirl of scented robes, he left Ned alone. The day wore on, turning into a dim, listless afternoon. Ned sat at his desk, though he could not focus on the parchments stacked before him. His thoughts wandered north, to Winterfell, to the last glimmer of autumn before the winter snows set in. He thought of Robb, Bran, Rickon, all the children he had left behind in that quiet castle. Would they ever understand the sort of man Petyr Baelish was, and why he had to be stopped? One day they might. He only hoped they would never need to learn those lessons firsthand. Sometime later, a small rap at the door disrupted his reflection. Jory Castle entered, face grim. My lord, he said, the men have seized Baelish's manse. It's as Lord Varys said. Hidden compartments, coded messages. We've brought in the scribes to decode them, but it will be some time before we have a full accounting. Ned nodded. Good. Ensure the men treat any staff at the manse with fairness. We don't want them fleeing or hiding more evidence. Jory hesitated. Of course, my lord. There's also a matter of some visitors. A handful of less savory folk turned up, claiming they were in Baelish's employ and demanding wages. Others, ironically, came offering coin in exchange for favors they believed Baelish could grant them. When we told them Petyr Baelish was dead, some tried to barter with us instead. Yeah? A weary sigh escaped Ned's lips. So the vultures descend. Handle it with caution, Jory. Tell them the Master of Coin is no more and his deals died with him. We'll not be granting any illegal favors or continuing questionable arrangement. Jory placed a fist to his chest, bowed, and left. The door closed with a quiet thud. In the silence, Ned massaged his temples, trying to push away the growing headache. With Baelish gone, the Master of Coin's position would need filling. The king might let it remain vacant for a time, or perhaps bestow it upon some new ambitious lord from the Reach or the Westerlands. Yet no matter who took up that seat, Ned feared they would follow in the footprints Petyr Baelish had left behind. The culture of greed and deceit in King's Landing was too entrenched to vanish with a single execution. By nightfall, King's Landing was awash in torchlight. Lanterns glowing in the windows of the shops and taverns that dotted the winding streets. Whispers of Baelish's end circulated like wildfire. Some believed the man had cursed the city with his dying breath. Others, mostly merchants who had dealings with him, worried about outstanding debts or lost fortunes. The brothels that Littlefinger had owned or taken secret shares in found themselves in disarray, unsure who would come to claim ownership, or if the crown would seize them outright. In his private chambers, Ned prepared a simple meal. He had no appetite, but he forced down a few bites of bread and cheese, reminding himself that a weary mind needed sustenance. He thought of the north, the long winter nights around a roaring hearth, the security of a land where he could at least trust in the loyalty of his own people. Here, the Red Keep felt like a nest of vipers. Baelish was gone, but other, subtler threats remained, half hidden in the shadows. In the corridor outside Ned's chambers, the soft tread of footsteps announced the arrival of his daughter. Arya slipped in, face flushed. Her hair was tangled, cheeks red from running. She looked at her father with wide, questioning eyes. "I heard what happened," she said, voice hushed. "Was it true, father, that Lord Baelish tried to betray us all?" "Next ton," Ned nodded solemnly. "It was. He plotted to turn the city watch to his own ends, to unseat me his hand. Likely more than that. There's no telling how far it would have gone." Arya frowned, fiddling with a loose thread on her sleeve. "But they killed him. Just like that." They say the king was furious. A pang of guilt tugged at Ned's heart. Arya was no stranger to steel or death. He had taught her about the responsibilities of nobility. But to witness the speed at which treachery ended in blood in King's Landing was another matter. Yes, the king was angry, and he wanted to make a point. Treason is not forgiven in the realm. He paused, searching her face. "Arya, you weren't there, were you?" She shook her head but didn't meet his eyes. "I just heard them talking about it in the yard." Sansa was crying in her room. She said Lord Baelish once told her nice stories about how she was a flower growing in the mud of the city. But I think she didn't really know what he was like. Ned exhaled. "I didn't want you or your sister to see. It's not something I'm proud of, but it was necessary." Membenos down. Arya stepped closer, her gaze darting around the small chamber as though she expected something or someone to emerge from the shadows. "Are we safe, father? You said that if Baelish was plotting something, others might be too. We are as safe as we can be, given the circumstances." Ned rested a hand gently on her shoulder. "You must keep up with your lessons and your training. Be mindful of who you trust. The city can be dangerous, even without Littlefinger schemes." "Bah." Arya nodded, the fierceness in her expression just a shade more subdued than usual. She hugged her father briefly, a gesture that reminded Ned of her youth, of how much she needed him even in her bravado. Then she slipped out, leaving Ned alone once more. As the night deepened, Ned found himself haunted by the day's events. He gazed at the flickering candle on his desk, thinking about how the entire realm might change in the absence of Petyr Baelish. Some lords who were blackmailed might feel a sudden weight lifted, but others, who had relied on his cunning to secure their positions, might now panic. The balance of power could shift dramatically. Ned knew he had to keep a watchful eye on the rest of the small council, especially the Queen. Cersei Lannister would not hesitate to exploit any vacuum Baelish left behind. Then there was Lord Tywin in the west, always a looming force, and the Tyrells in the Reach, ambitious behind their polite smiles. The Martells in Dorne, simmering in their own brand of vengeance. The realm was a tapestry of tension. A single thread pulled could unravel the entire fabric. Yet for now, Petyr Baelish was gone. One threat removed. He had been the architect of so many of the capital's intrigues. The secret whisper that turned friend to foe. The coin that bought 1,000 precarious loyalties. Ned had to believe the realm was safer without him. But was it truly? Or had his death simply illuminated how many others yearned to inherit his mantle? Sometime past midnight, Ned leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling at him. He let his eyes drift shut and listened to the distant hum of the city's nightlife. Laughter and shouts from the taverns, the clatter of horses' hooves on cobblestones, the swirl of the wind off the bay. He thought about Winterfell's quiet nights, the sound of wolves howling in the woods, the comforting hush of snowdrifts. He thought about how far he was from the place he called home. At last, he found the strength to stand and extinguish the candles. As the flame died, the room sank into darkness. Morning would come soon enough, bringing fresh troubles, new audiences with the king, more tasks that a hand was expected to manage. The realm would go on, even with one less schemer in its midst. Ned made his way to his bed, collapsing onto it fully clothed, too weary to care. Sleep did not come easily, but eventually it claimed him, offering a temporary escape from the relentless weight of his duties. Dawn arrived, casting a gray light through the shutters. Outside, the gulls squawked by the harbor, and the daily life of King's Landing began anew. Bakers were already stoking their ovens, fishmongers set up stalls along the wharfs, and knights patrolled the streets. The city continued on, neither halted nor truly changed by the fall of one man. In the Red Keep, servants moved swiftly through the halls, carrying trays of bread and ale to break the fast of lords and ladies. The king stirred in his private chambers, no doubt cursing his hangover. Cersei Lannister stepped into the sunlight of a courtyard, her face as unreadable as a carved mask. Sansa Stark remained in her chamber, still shaken. Arya might be off to her lessons in swordsmanship with Syrio Forel, or exploring the castle's many secrets. None of them would see Petyr Baelish slipping through the corridors, for his footsteps had been silenced forever. In a small, windowless room, Varys sifted through a pile of parchment. The stubs of several candles burned down around him. He reached for one coded letter after another, a curious expression on his face, as though each were a puzzle piece to a game not yet fully revealed. Meanwhile, Grand Maester Pycelle recorded the official account of Baelish's crimes, a heavy quill scratching across parchment as he compiled the realm's ledger of traitors. Ned Stark, newly risen and worn from the weight of it all, began another day as Hand of the King. He oversaw the reallocation of the coin that Littlefinger had secreted away, and listened to the complaints of the lords who felt slighted or uneasy by the sudden departure of the Master of Coin. He tried to reassure those who believed a measure of stability had been lost with Baelish's downfall, while inwardly marveling at how quickly men adapted their attitudes when coin was involved. The day stretched long, and the labor of untangling Baelish's numerous ventures proved an arduous task. Some properties were half-owned in the names of foreign merchants. Others were set up under false identities, fronting obscure businesses or questionable trades. Each discovery spooled out a new lead, a new lie. It would take months, perhaps years, to fully account for every scheme Petyr Baelish had left behind. And yet, life went on. The king feasted and drank. The queen played her courtly games. The city bustled, its denizens forever embroiled in the struggle for survival, for pleasure, for power. By sundown, the gossip had already begun to shift to new scandals, new rumors. But in the corners of the capital, there were still those who cursed the day Petyr Baelish lost his head, those who once counted on him to climb higher in the echelons of power. They looked upon the Red Keep with mistrust, muttering that if a cunning man like Baelish could fall, perhaps it could happen to any of them. Such men would not stand idle. They would reposition themselves, forging fresh alliances, seeking a new patron or a new conspiracy. The game never truly ended. That evening, as Ned Stark withdrew to his chambers, he found his mind lingering on the memory of Petyr Baelish's mockingbird sigil, that tiny silver bird that once symbolized a cunning ambition. Who would pick it up now? Or would it be discarded in some dusty corner, lost to memory? He thought of the first time he met Baelish, how the man wore a confident smirk even in the face of dire warnings. He recalled how Baelish once said, in passing, that knowledge was the purest form of power. It was ironic that, in the end, his own knowledge, exposed documents and secrets, had been the very sword that cut him down. Ned prayed quietly to the old gods that this small measure of truth would be enough to keep the realm from further harm. And in the silent darkness of his chamber, he could almost hear the wind sighing through the weirwood trees of the distant north, whispering a lullaby of ice and honor. Petyr Baelish's schemes were over, and King's Landing was, for the moment, spared from his labyrinth of deceit. Whether this was the end of a grand conspiracy or the birth of an even greater tumult, only time would tell. For now, Ned Stark lay down with a heavy heart, bracing for whatever the morrow might bring. In a city built upon secrets, peace was a fleeting thing. He only hoped that the cost of preserving it would not demand more blood, more lives, more illusions. As the last candle guttered out, the darkness seemed gentler than before, as though at least one poisonous thread had been plucked from the tapestry of the realm. Baelish was gone, but the game continued in King's Landing, its players reshuffling their pieces. each one determined to seize the advantage that had slipped from the fallen master of coin's cold, dead fingers. And so the wheel of power turned again, never truly pausing, spurred on by ambition, by pride, and by fear of what might yet lie in the shadows. A long night of disturbed sleep wore at Eddard Stark's mind, and when he rose the next morning, the first light through his window felt thin, like a veil between dreams and waking. His limbs felt stiff, as though he had aged years in a single night. Yet the duties of the hand of the king called him, as they always did. He splashed cold water on his face, dressed in plain woolens, his mourning for the realm's troubles more than for the man executed, and summoned the stoic resolve that Winterfell's lord was expected to possess. Outside his chambers, 2 of his northern guards awaited him, Jory Castle and Tamard. They wore grim expressions. He could see in their eyes the same question reflected in his own. What new intrigues might unravel now that Petyr Baelish was no more? Neither man spoke as they accompanied Ned down the hall. Others in the Red Keep passed with guarded expressions, some with eyes cast down to avoid catching the new hand's gaze, others watching him with open curiosity, as though hoping to glean a sign of how the power within these walls might shift next. They arrived at a small council chamber, set aside for private meetings. Normally, such a gathering might be held in the official council room, but Ned had chosen to keep the circle tight for this discussion. Varys was already there, perched at the table's end, his robes draping like a shadow of lavender and cream. Grand Maester Pycelle, stoop-shouldered and blinking like an owl, shuffled inside soon after. Lord Renly arrived in a swirl of green velvet and perfumed gloves, an uneasy tilt to his mouth betraying his uncertainty. The king himself had not yet appeared, which hardly surprised Ned. Robert's mornings were not known for punctual starts. The hush that settled over the group felt weighty, and for a time none spoke. Varys offered a small, polite cough. "My lords, perhaps while we await his grace, we can begin addressing the question of the Master of Coin's vacant seat." Renly's eyebrows lifted in mild surprise, as though he had not expected the matter to be raised so soon. Pycelle rattled a breath. "Yes, yes," he said, stroking the long white whiskers that trailed down his chin. "The realm's finances cannot remain in disarray. Someone must be named to handle the crown's accounts, especially now that so many of Baelish's activities have come to light." Ned looked around, his lips thinning at the thought of scouring through that labyrinth of fraud and cunning. "The king has not yet named a successor," he said. "We must proceed carefully. Lord Baelish left behind considerable confusion. Funds diverted to unknown ends, false documents, half-constructed deals. I fear we'll be unwinding his knots for weeks, if not months." Renly sighed, resting his elbows on the table. In truth, Baelish had a knack for keeping the crown afloat, even if he did it through illusions and manipulations. He was the reason half the realm's lords could be counted on for quick loans. Now we're left with no illusions and plenty of debts. Ned remembered the conversation with Jory about the unscrupulous folk showing up at Littlefinger's manse, demanding what they were owed or offering new coin in exchange for undisclosed favors. "The city is rife with rumor," he murmured. "We can't allow more chaos to spread. The king will decide who takes the office, but perhaps we can recommend a suitable candidate. Someone honest, with experience, not enthralled by the prospect of personal enrichment." Renly gave a dry laugh. "Dear brother that I love, do you believe any man in King's Landing lacks that enthrallment? This city feasts on wealth and power like a starved dog at a butcher's stall. We must find someone savvy enough to manage the crown's finances without resorting to Baelish's brand of trickery." Before Ned could respond, the chamber doors swung open to admit the king. Robert Baratheon appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 gold cloaks. He wore a frayed tunic of black and gold, and the smell of last night's wine still seemed to cling to him. His eyes were bloodshot, but they flashed with an underlying vigor that belied any hangover. He waved off the guards and lumbered inside. "Damnable business," he growled, settling into the high-backed chair meant for him. He cast a glance around the table. "Well, go on, speak. Where do we stand after we lopped off Baelish's head?" Varys bowed his head in a gesture as courteous as a cat's graceful dip. "Your grace, We were just discussing the vacancy of the Master of Coin's seat and the confusion left in Lord Baelish's wake. I believe Lord Stark can guide us on the measures required to restore order." Ned cleared his throat. "Your Grace, we should secure what remains of Baelish's holdings, repurpose or reclaim them under the Crown's auspices. The gold hidden in his manse and in certain secret vaults we've discovered can be used to alleviate some of the Crown's debts." Robert eyed him. "As long as we can keep the gold from slithering into the pockets of worthless lickspittles. You're suggesting we root out all Baelish's secrets. Fine. Dine. Do it. And appoint someone to keep it organized until I name a new Master of Coin. Could be a scribe, a clerk, a rat catcher for all I care. Just someone who won't line his own purse." "Baumski." Renly exhaled, leaning forward. "I know a few men in the city who might serve temporarily. I'll select one personally, someone with a modest background, little known, so he'll draw no undue alliances." He cast Ned a glance. Assuming the hand agrees, Ned inclined his head, grateful for the courtesy. "So long as you choose carefully, Lord Renly. We cannot afford a second Baelish." "Dandily," Robert snorted, then waved a hand as though brushing aside a troublesome fly. "Very well. See it done. Now, is there anything more about that scoundrel we need to address? Or can we talk of more pressing matters?" He looked to Varys, who pressed his lips into a thin line. "There's one matter, Your Grace," Varys said softly. "The gold cloaks caught a handful of men rummaging through Baelish's brothels last night, pimps and mercenaries likely. They claim to have blackmail material hidden away. The truth of their words remains uncertain. The men are in the dungeons now. Should we question them? Or perhaps release them and focus on more direct threats?" "Deny." Robert's scowl deepened. "If they have blackmail material, I'd see it in our possession before it circulates. Let them squeal in the dungeons a bit, then see what they offer." Ned disliked the notion of letting men languish in cells, but the city was too unpredictable to risk letting potential evidence slip free. "We'll question them. If they're lying, we send them on their way. If they're telling the truth, we confiscate what they have." Robert nodded, a short, curt motion. "Good. That's the end of it then." His gaze raked over them one by one, and Ned sensed the king's impatience to leave. Indeed, Robert's next words proved it. "I have a mind to go hawking this afternoon. Let my head clear. You lot deal with the rest. And if there's any more serpents lurking in the palace, make sure their heads end up on spikes." With that, the king rose, leaving them to stand in his wake. The door banged shut behind him, and the reverberations lingered. Renly released a weary breath. He can't wait to be out of here, can he? On some days I can't blame him. "Dear Benham," Pycelle coughed into his sleeve. "His Grace's enthusiasm for sport is legendary, my lords. At times, I worry about the realm's finances, but I shall offer my services as always." Ned glanced at the old maester, then at Varys, who offered one of his elusive smiles. "We all do what we can," said the spy master lightly, "though some find more enjoyable pursuits than others. My lords, if there is nothing else, I shall see to those men in the dungeons and attempt to glean any secrets they might possess." Renly waved a tired hand. "Yes, go. I'll take care of finding a temporary caretaker of the treasury. Lord Stark, if you need me, I'll be in my chambers drafting letters to the Lords of the Reach." He paused, his gaze drifting over Ned. "If you'd like some counsel on suitable candidates, come find me." Ned nodded, appreciating that Renly was at least making an effort to cooperate. Once the chamber had emptied, Ned found himself standing alone. The morning sun slanting through the high windows. He allowed himself a moment of silence to absorb the swirl of developments. So much was uncertain. No matter how thick the Red Keep's walls, there was always a chill in the air when men conspired. He made his way from the chamber, accompanied by Jory. The corridors grew more crowded as servants bustled about, carrying trays of midday fare or fresh linens. Laughter and gossip drifted from behind closed doors, and the occasional hush would fall over groups of courtiers as Ned passed. The Hand's presence was noted everywhere, especially now. If Baelish's downfall had taught them anything, it was that Lord Stark, though he seemed straightforward, was not a man to be underestimated. Eventually, Ned reached his own solar, a quieter space overlooking a small courtyard of the Red Keep. He settled behind a table piled with parchment, ledgers, claims of debt, partial confessions. There was no end to Baelish's shadow. No matter how scorned a man had been at the end, many in the city had done business with him. Now they came forward, anxious to rectify outstanding loans or prove their innocence in deals that suddenly looked treacherous. Ned massaged the bridge of his nose, trying to make sense of it all. A knock sounded at the door. "Come," he called. One of his household guards stepped in, bowing slightly. "My lord, your daughter Sansa is here." The guard hesitated, glancing back into the hall. Sansa hovered behind him, looking tentative. Ned beckoned her forward. "Let her in. That will be all." Sansa entered, the hem of her pale blue gown skimming the floor. Her eyes were rimmed with tiredness, and her hands fidgeted in front of her. Ned offered her a gentle smile. "My sweet girl, I didn't see you at breakfast." She curtsied, though formality felt out of place. "Father, I wanted to speak with you. I know I'm not supposed to trouble you with such matters, but..." She paused, swallowing hard. "When Lord Baelish was still here, he promised I could visit one of his establishments to see the singers. He said they had minstrels from all over the realm. He made it sound so wonderful. Now he's gone, executed for treason." Her voice wavered. How could he have been so kind to me if he was a traitor? Ned stood, moving around the table to place his hands gently on her shoulders. "Kind words can come from a deceitful heart, my dear. Lord Baelish was many things to many people. He liked to appear helpful and charming because it served his ambitions. Do not blame yourself for believing him. That was how he operated. How he ensnared the trust of people who should have known better." "No." Sansa's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I wish I'd known. He told me about tournaments and hinted that he might help me see the crown's finances at work, so I'd understand the realm better. I was so eager to learn, I never thought he might be scheming." Ned stroked her hair softly, recalling the sweet innocence of the North and how it clashed with the cunning of King's Landing. "In time, you'll learn how to see a man's true nature behind his smiles. But do not let mistrust harden your heart entirely, Sansa. There are good people even here. You simply need to tread carefully." She nodded, chin quivering. "What will happen now, with all of Lord Baelish's things?" "I've heard talk that the crown might confiscate the brothels, the houses, everything." "That's likely," Ned confirmed. "The crown will either sell them off or manage them in some official capacity, though I doubt the king has the patience to run brothels." He let out a breath. "Eventually, they'll pass to someone else. Possibly the next master of coin." Sansa lowered her gaze. "Thank you, Father. I just wanted to be sure that we're safe now, that no one else will try to harm our family the way Lord Baelish did. If he was plotting against you, maybe others." Ned silenced her concerns with a gentle squeeze of her hand. "We are never fully safe here, child. But as long as we stand together, we will weather any storm. Now go, and don't let these shadows trouble you overly. There will be a new day ahead." "Member." She curtsied again, then stepped out, leaving Ned to contemplate how the illusions spun by Petyr Baelish had reached even into the hearts of those who yearned for simple kindness. King's Landing wore many faces, but rarely did it show a gentle one without concealed motives. He returned to his desk, forcing himself to wade through the accounts. The hours drifted, punctuated by the scratch of quill on parchment, and the steady drumbeat of footsteps in the corridors. Servants brought him a simple midday meal, which he barely noticed as he worked. At length, Jory reappeared with a quiet knock, stepping in to report that Varys had finished interrogating the men in the dungeon. They claimed to possess certain ledgers showing hush payments to half the guards in the Red Keep, but after thorough questioning, it seemed they'd only overheard talk of such records. They had nothing tangible to show. They were common troublemakers, hoping to trade rumors for coin or favor. Ned dismissed them as nuisances, but ordered they remain in custody another day, just in case. A cunning man might have concealed his evidence in more cunning ways. As dusk approached, Ned set aside the ledgers and left his solar. Outside, a faint breeze stirred the turrets, carrying the sultane of the Blackwater Bay. He needed to clear his head. Thoughts of Baelish's conspiracies clung to him like cobwebs, and he yearned for a whiff of fresh air. Descending a winding set of stone steps, he emerged into one of the small gardens within the keep's walls. It was a quiet patch of greenery, with a few twisted olive trees and dusty rose bushes that struggled to bloom in the city's heat. A trickling fountain provided a soothing murmur. There, he found Arya, his younger daughter, perched upon the edge of the fountain, swinging her legs restlessly. When she saw him, she offered a quick smile. "Father," she greeted. "Are you finally done?" She hopped down, her little boots kicking up dust. "I was about to see if I could sneak out to the yard for more practice." Ned smiled in spite of himself. "Practice with Sirio Forel, I take it." Arya nodded enthusiastically. "He says a water dancer cannot rely on dull repetition alone. We must move like quicksilver and adapt. But sometimes, I think I need more practice than that." "Nandamahal." Ned studied her lively eyes, the same gray as his own but lit with a spark that was all her. "I'm glad you have something to focus on," he said gently. "But be mindful, the Red Keep is not Winterfell. I don't want you wandering alone." Arya gave a small pout, but her voice softened. "I know, Father. She glanced around, lowering her voice. "Sansa's been upset since Lord Baelish's execution. She still doesn't see how a man can wear a friendly face and yet be a traitor." "Me, She hesitated. "I think almost anyone here could be that way. Except maybe you." Ned placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We must keep our wits about us. Baelish wore a mask for many. That mask has finally been torn away. Perhaps next time, the realm will be quicker to see false smiles for what they are." Arya nodded, but the tension in her posture did not lessen. "I should go, Father. Syria will be waiting." She dashed off, her strides purposeful, leaving Ned to wonder at how quickly his daughters were being shaped by this city of hidden daggers. He lingered by the fountain, letting the soft trickle of water calm him. Overhead the sky bled orange and violet, the day's warmth settling into an amber glow. It was in those moments that Ned felt the enormity of his responsibilities pressing in. One slip, and his family could become pawns in a crueler game than Baelish's. He vowed silently to keep them safe, though how he would manage that in a city ruled by the king's vices and the queen's ambitions, he did not yet know. Night came, and torches were lit throughout the keep. Ned dined briefly in his chambers with a few of his men, the meal a subdued affair. Talk inevitably drifted to the day's business. Baelish's labyrinth of false accounts, rumors of new plots, the unsettled mood among the gold cloaks. The men from the north cast uneasy glances at one another whenever the subject of the city watch arose. Many still remembered how easily Baelish had influenced Janos Slint. Some wondered if the gold that changed hands was still out there, fueling hidden loyalties that might one day turn on Ned himself. He tried to reassure them. "The king has seen how deep this rot goes," Ned said. "If anyone seeks to continue Baelish's practices, they will be met with the same justice." Yet the words rang hollow, for in his heart he knew King Robert could be easily distracted, especially if the bribery or corruption did not threaten him directly. After the meal, Ned found his bed, though sleep was no easier than the night before. His dreams carried him back to the courtyard where Petyr Baelish had knelt at the block. He saw the mockingbird's sigil pinned to Baelish's collar, the gleam of the executioner's sword in the gray light, the sound of the crowd's uneasy murmur. And in the dream, the moment the sword fell, Baelish's eyes snapped open as though he were alive, mocking Ned in silent laughter. Ned woke in a cold sweat. Eventually, he managed to drift off again, thoughts tumbling in restless circles. Morning came once more. He rose, met with his men, and waded through the daily tide of petitioners. Some came from the city's underbelly, thrusting forward scraps of parchment that detailed coin owed to them by Baelish's various businesses. Some were noblemen complaining that Baelish's abrupt end had cut off the flow of coin promised for certain pet projects. Ned listened, weighed the requests, and tried to handle them justly. A thankless job, but one that fell upon the hand. Around midday, as Ned dismissed a minor lord who swore Baelish had promised funds for a new wharf, Varys arrived with a rare sense of haste. The Master of Whisperers slipped in like a ghost, closing the door behind him. Jory Castle, standing watch, moved aside with a wary glance, letting Varys pass. Ned turned from the window where he'd been standing. "What news?" Varys' expression was grave. "My little birds have begun to pry deeper into the corners Baelish once occupied. It appears that some of his men, those we could not account for, have fled the city. I suspect they carry sensitive information, though I'm not certain which secrets they bear. They may be heading west, perhaps hoping to trade that information to Lord Tywin Lannister. Or north, if they believe House Stark might reward them for something. The trouble is, we do not know what they have, or who might pay for it." Ned felt a surge of alarm. If they go to the Lannisters, it could strengthen Tywin's hand. If they go elsewhere, Varys nodded. The Free Cities, Dorne, the Vale. Any region might benefit from the right piece of intelligence. Baelish was privy to countless secrets. Some of them might not be relevant anymore, but you can be certain that cunning lords will pay handsomely for knowledge of any missteps or vulnerabilities. Ned paced the room, fists clenching at his sides. "We must intercept them. If they're traveling on the King's Road, or by sea, we can send riders or swift ships to bring them back. Or kill them on sight," Varys suggested with a soft, regretful sigh. "If they carry damaging secrets, the simplest solution might be to ensure they never speak." Ned's jaw tightened. "I've had my fill of bloodshed. But we cannot allow them to auction the realm's stability to the highest bidder. If you can locate them, I'll see they're apprehended and questioned." "Mapirol, I will do my utmost," Varys promised. "Though they move quickly and discreetly. Baelish's old network may still be aiding them." Ned thanked him, though his mood darkened further. Even in death, Petyr Baelish cast a long shadow. After Varys departed, Ned stood by the narrow window, looking upon the city sprawling below. The cluttered rooftops, the winding alleys, the teeming crowds. How many here still felt the strings of Littlefinger's puppet dance? Even if the puppet master was gone, he strode back to his desk and summoned Jory. "Gather what men you can spare. We'll send riders along the roads leading north, west, and south. We won't make a public show of it. Just quiet watchers who can alert us if they spot suspicious travelers that might match descriptions of Baelish's men. Stress that we want them alive if possible." Jory bowed. "I'll see to it, my lord." That done, Ned tried to refocus on the day's obligations, but his thoughts kept drifting to the missing men, to the uncertain path ahead. The city remained a twisting labyrinth of ambition, and one man's demise had merely shifted the walls. By late afternoon, word reached him that the king was holding an informal gathering in the courtyard. Wishing to see the new hawks that had been brought from the Stormlands, with a resigned sigh, Ned made his way there, hoping to find Robert in a mood conducive to hearing urgent news. He arrived to the sight of several gaudily dressed courtiers gathered in a half-circle around the king, who was examining a majestic hawk perched on a handler's arm. The bird's eyes were as sharp as the king's were bleary, for Robert had evidently been sampling strong ale all day. Cersei Lannister stood a few paces away, wearing a bored expression hidden behind a mask of courtesy. Joffrey lingered near his mother, looking sullen. The presence of the royal family demanded a show of respect, so Ned bowed, waiting until the king acknowledged him with a short grunt. "There you are, Ned," Robert said, passing the hawk back to its handler. "Look at this beauty. Wings like a sword's blade, they tell me. I'll test her out on the morrow." Ned dipped his head in polite agreement. "A fine bird, your grace. I pray it serves you well." Robert sniffed, turning to address the small group. "Well, let's be done with hawks for now. You," he pointed at a nervous steward, "fetch more ale." Then, under his breath, he added to Ned, "Can't abide half these fools. Anyway, how goes the business with Baelish's mess?" The king's callous phrasing didn't surprise Ned. "We've begun sorting the finances. There is also a concern, your grace. Some of his men have fled the city, possibly carrying secrets. I'd suggest we dispatch the King's Guard or other loyal knights to track them. Robert's broad face hardened. Bloody leeches. Fine. Have your men do what needs doing. Kill them if they resist. We don't need more meddling with the realm. Before Ned could say more, Cersei drifted closer, her emerald eyes assessing. "Trouble, my lord Hand?" she inquired, voice as smooth as silk. Ned regarded the queen, keeping his tone even, merely ensuring that certain loose ends are dealt with. Cersei's red gold hair glinted in the late sunlight, and a smile curved her lips. "Loose ends. I'm sure Lord Baelish left many. One does not survive in the capital by being naive." She paused, letting her gaze wander over Ned's face. "You've done the realm a service by exposing his duplicity. I should almost thank you. He was always meddling in Lannister affairs, though never to our benefit." Ned kept his silence, not trusting the subtext behind her words. Cersei extended a graceful hand to examine one of the hawks, but her attention remained on Ned. "I wonder, Lord Stark, if you'll find Baelish's ghosts more troublesome than the man himself. Secrets have a way of haunting their keepers, especially when someone new inherits them." He read the challenge in her eyes, but he refused to rise to it. "Secrets are best laid bare, your grace." She allowed a small laugh. "We shall see." Then she turned to walk away, leaving Ned to the uneasy knowledge that she was not finished prying into whatever knowledge Baelish might have left behind. Darkness claimed the sky once more, with stars glimmering faintly over the Red Keep's battlements. Within the castle's labyrinthine halls, torches and lanterns cast flickering shadows against the stone. Ned lingered in the library after supper, hoping to find reference to certain funds Baelish had controlled in the past. He pored over dusty ledgers with the help of a quiet scribe who coughed every few moments in the stillness. Page after page revealed the master of coin's cunning manipulations. Lines of credit established in the names of petty lords, foreign contacts who loaned gold at suspiciously high rates, hidden taxes funneled into personal projects. The deeper Ned delved, the more he grasped how far-reaching Baelish's web had been. At one point, he paused to run his fingers across a margin note, scrawled in a neat, mocking script. It read, "To climb, one must cut loose those who weigh you down." Ned felt a shiver dance along his spine, as though Baelish's voice mocked him from beyond the grave. Had this note been meant as a private joke, or some cryptic reminder? Petyr Baelish had always thrived on half-truths and cryptic riddles, relishing the knowledge that even the slightest puzzle could unnerve an opponent. With a deep sigh, Ned shut the ledger and dismissed the scribe. He returned to his chambers, where he found the hour late and the corridors mostly empty. Sleep tugged at him, and yet his mind refused to quiet. Instead of collapsing into bed, he found himself pacing to the small balcony that overlooked the Red Keep's outer walls. The city stretched below, illuminated by torches, drifting smoke, and the pale shimmer of moonlight. Sometimes, from this vantage, the city looked almost peaceful, like a mosaic of rooftops and winding streets. He reminded himself that beneath that outward stillness, countless intrigues roiled. He thought of Catelyn, far away. He felt her absence keenly, wishing she were here to offer counsel and comfort. Would she believe that Baelish's death might bring them peace? Or would she see the storm that lingered in the aftermath? A soft sound startled him. He turned to see that Arya stood at the threshold of his chambers, that wiry energy radiating from her even in the late hour. She hesitated. "Father, I heard you pacing. Couldn't sleep." Ned beckoned her closer. "I fear I've too many thoughts tonight. Are you well?" Arya shrugged, gazing at the moonlit city. "I had another lesson with Syrio. He says I'm improving, but he also says I'm too quick to anger, that I need to flow like water." She paused, then asked quietly, "Will the city calm now that Baelish is gone?" Ned studied her face, struck by how much she had grown since they left Winterfell. "It may calm in some ways, but in others, it could grow worse. Baelish's cunning held back certain rivalries by weaving them into his schemes. Now those tensions might flare up. We must stay vigilant." She nodded, absorbing his words. "I will be, and I'll protect Sansa too." He placed a hand on her head. "I know you will." They stood together in silence, father and daughter watching the kingdom's capital slumber. Though in truth, King's Landing never truly slept. It dreamed on its feet, forging new plots in every tavern, every alleyway, every palace corridor. Had Petyr Baelish not taught them all how easy it was to warp trust and shape chaos to one's advantage? Eventually, Arya stifled a yawn, and Ned guided her back to her bedchamber, pressing a fatherly kiss to her brow. Alone again, he allowed himself only a brief glance at the city before turning away, lighting a candle, and seeking the comfort of bed. His last waking thought was of a mockingbird in flight, wings beating against the wind, vanishing into the gloom. Even in death, the echo of Petyr Baelish's schemes might reverberate through the Seven Kingdoms. Like a final jest from a clever man who believed chaos was a ladder for those brave enough, or reckless enough, to climb it. The next day dawned warmer, the sun breaking over the horizon with an almost aggressive brightness. Ned began his routine of reviewing correspondences. The tension in King's Landing had not lessened. Word came of skirmishes in the Riverlands, roving bands of armed men preying on travelers. Whispers hinted they might be mercenaries previously paid by Baelish, now turned brigands without his coin. Ned dispatched messages urging local lords to tighten patrols, but he knew that the real solution lay in discovering who might now be backing these sellswords. By midday, a visitor arrived. Sir Barristan Selmy, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Age weighed gently on Selmy's lined face, but his courtesy and sense of honor remained steadfast. He bowed his head when Ned greeted him. "Lord Stark, might I have a word?" Ned offered a respectful nod. "Of course, Sir Barristan. How can I help you?" Selmy glanced around, ensuring no one else lingered too close. "I bring the matter of some delicacy. The Kingsguard has maintained certain records of persons who visited the Red Keep in secret. Lord Baelish had a penchant for meeting with individuals at odd hours, hush-hush appointments. One of my men discovered a partial log, indicating that some visitors came under false names. Others were identified only by initials or coded references." "Ian." Ned tensed. "Who do you suspect they might be?" Selmy lowered his voice. "Potentially members of the Crown's court, or lords from other regions. It's unclear, but it suggests Baelish may have orchestrated more than financial deals. He might have set events in motion that we've yet to uncover. The king, in his current temper, has little patience for investigating ghostly riddles. But as Lord Commander, I feel obliged to inform you." "Elshan." Ned felt the weight of gratitude that Selmy, at least, was loyal to the realm above petty politics. "Thank you, Sir Barristan. I'll need that log, whatever it contains." Selmy produced a small parchment from within his cloak. "These are the only scraps we have thus far. I caution you, some of the coded entries might point to powerful figures who would deny any involvement." Ned took the parchment, eyes scanning the arcane symbols. The writing was interspersed with abbreviations like the Hawk, the Crow, the Crone, alongside dates and times. One line read, "Arrangement made in the Tower of the Hand, Night's End," with no further clarification. Another referenced a rumored meeting, under the moon, by the Maiden Vault. Ned's brow furrowed, recognizing that deciphering these cryptic notes would be a tedious challenge. Selmy stood quietly, giving Ned a moment to digest the information. At length, Ned looked up. "I'll see what can be made of these references. Thank you for bringing this to me. It shows Baelish was even more deeply enmeshed in secrets than we feared." "Meshed." Selmy bowed again. "I serve the crown, Lord Stark. Good luck unraveling this. The king is a man of action more than investigation. If you need the Kingsguard's assistance, do not hesitate." When the Lord Commander was gone, Ned stood there holding the parchment as though it were a map leading to a dragon's hoard. Dangerous and uncertain. He pondered who might help decode it. Varys possessed a mind for such riddles, but Ned had never fully trusted the spymaster's shifting loyalties. Still, he might have no choice. He found Varys in a small antechamber not far from the throne room, engaged in hushed conversation with one of his little birds, a child no older than 10. At Ned's approach, the child scurried away silently, leaving Varys to greet him with a mild smile. "My Lord Hand, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Ned handed him the parchment. "One of Selmy's men recovered this from Baelish's hidden records. I assume you can decipher at least some of these codes." Varys studied the document. His eyes flickered with interest. The hawk, the crow, the crone. Poetic, isn't it? And these times and dates. If I recall correctly, Baelish often used such metaphorical designations for certain individuals, but he changed them frequently. The hawk might have been a traveling bard in one instance, or a noble lady in another. Petyr. Ned's shoulders tightened. That's maddeningly unhelpful. A soft chuckle escaped Varys' lips. Indeed. Yet it's also a clue. We can cross-reference the times and dates with official records. If a certain lord was known to be absent from his chambers during these hours, we might match the code name to him. That is, if the individual didn't hide in shadows. Then I'm the tree. Ned pinched the bridge of his nose. We'll start there. Also references to the Tower of the Hand, my own seat. Baelish may have arranged private meetings there, presumably before I came. Or while I was away from my chambers. Varys inclined his head. I'll have my scribes begin the cross-referencing. I expect some names may surprise you, if indeed we can glean them. Baelish was resourceful when it came to dealing with individuals who had something to hide. Ned thanked him, yet the weight in his chest grew heavier. Every time he thought Baelish's ghost might be laid to rest, a fresh piece of evidence surfaced, drawing him deeper into the labyrinth. He felt as though he were walking through a darkened cave, each torch he lit revealing new tunnels twisting away. Days bled into one another as the city went about its lively chaos. Audiences were held, the king hunted and feasted. The queen entertained her retinue, and Ned labored at unraveling the master of coin's old illusions. In that time, the men he'd sent out in pursuit of Baelish's fleeing agents returned with minimal success. They reported sightings of suspicious travelers on the King's Road, but no captures. Even Jory's best trackers could not confirm who they were, or whether they indeed carried vital information. Some travelers vanished into the countryside. Some booked passage on merchant ships out of King's Landing. The trail went cold. Ned's frustration mounted. He found himself losing sleep, haunted by the sense that each day that passed, new secrets escaped, scattering like seeds in the wind. How long until they took root in the minds of the realm's unscrupulous lords? One morning a messenger arrived from Rosby, a short ride northeast of the city. The note stated that a group of armed men had been seen passing through the outskirts, heading toward the Crown Lands. Locals whispered these men were well-funded, flashing gold dragons minted in recent months, the same minted under Baelish's oversight. Ned dispatched more riders, but again, there was no guarantee they would overtake the group. In the midst of this turmoil, Ned also contended with the routine demands of the Hand's office. Disputes between landed knights, tensions in the Stormlands, Tywin Lannister's movements in the west. The realm offered no mercy. Its problems were unceasing, and Ned had little time to reflect on the personal toll. He began to realize how thoroughly Baelish had entrenched himself in every corner of governance, leaving behind 1,000 half-resolved arrangements. For every one Ned unraveled, 2 more seemed to surface. Yet amid this turmoil, King's Landing carried on. The taverns remained loud with song. The street markets bustled with hawkers selling eels and fruit from the Reach. The young knights preened before ladies in the tourney grounds behind the Red Keep. Over time, the gossip about Baelish's death softened into just another story in a city that devoured drama like a bottomless pit. Some recalled his cunning with grudging admiration. Others insisted they had always known he was a snake. Meanwhile, new intrigues sprang up, overshadowing the old. But Ned Stark refused to forget, for he sensed the true consequences had yet to unfold. One late afternoon, a sense of renewed purpose seized him as he reviewed the partial logs Varys' scribes had compiled. Through cross-referencing, they had identified at least 2 known visitors, a lesser cousin of House Tyrell and a distant relative of a lord from the Westerlands. Both had scheduled late-night rendezvous that coincided with coded references to the Lily and the Gold Lion. The Tyrell cousin had left the city months ago, but the Westerlands lord remained here. That might be something tangible. Ned ordered an immediate inquiry. Accompanied by Jory and a pair of gold cloaks, he made his way to the lavish apartments where this minor Lannister cousin resided. The young man was named Sir Daemon Lannister, a distant scion of the main branch, known primarily for gambling and revelry. He greeted Ned with a mixture of boredom and alarm. "Lord Hand?" Sir Damon said, affecting a lazy bow. "To what do I owe this unexpected courtesy?" Ned fixed him with a stern look. "I have reason to believe you frequented private meetings with Petyr Baelish. You'll tell me why. Now." Damon's eyes flickered with apprehension, but he tried to maintain his facade of arrogance. "Baelish and I had business dealings, that's all. He invested in certain shipments from Lannisport, casks of wine, exotic spices. Perfectly legitimate, my Lord Hand." Ned took a slow step forward, noticing how the man's hand trembled slightly around the goblet of wine he held. "You visited him in secret at the hour of the wolf." "Why?" Damon forced a laugh, though it rang hollow. It was his preference. Baelish liked quiet arrangements. Some shipments had questionable paperwork. High tariffs, you understand. He helped me avoid certain fees. No. Ned exchanged a glance with Jory, who stood impassive as stone. "Smuggling," Ned said flatly. "You smuggled goods past the Crown's tariffs with Baelish's help. Is that all?" Sir Damon swallowed hard, and Ned could see the sweat beating at his temple. "Yes, that's the sum of it. Unless you wish to know about the brothel visits he arranged for my men and me. He offered discounts. Said we were favored customers. Gods, it was all in good fun, my lord." Ned considered him in silence. The man might be telling a half-truth, but it could still be relevant. "Any further secrets you shared with Baelish? Any reason you'd meet him for reasons beyond smuggling?" Damon shook his head vehemently. "No, I swear. I'd never risk my family's reputation on deeper plots. The Lannisters deal in coin openly, not in midnight conspiracies. Baelish was the one with a penchant for cloak and dagger nonsense." Seeing little else to gain, Ned nodded to Jory. The Northern Knight took a step forward. "Sir Damon, you'll accompany us to the Red Keep, where you'll provide a written statement. If your honesty proves true, we'll levy a fine and let you go. But if we find you've withheld anything, we'll see you answer for it." Panic flitted across Damon's features, but he bowed stiffly. "Of course. Anything you say." They led him away, ignoring his muttered protests and attempts to haggle. Smuggling was a crime, but far from treason, and Ned's primary concern was whether Damon held knowledge of more dangerous schemes. If the man truly knew nothing, then he was just another gullible noble foolish enough to dabble in Baelish's shadow markets. In the quiet that followed, Ned recognized this was how it would likely continue. A slow crawl through half-truths and petty crimes, trying to piece together a mosaic. Baelish's greater treasons had been laid bare, but the smaller threads he wove might take a lifetime to unravel. And in a city teeming with ambitious hearts, was he even guaranteed the time to see it through? The thought weighed on him as he entered the Red Keep's gates, the sun already dipping behind the walls. He turned Sir Damon over to the gold cloaks, instructing them to keep him confined, but in comfortable quarters until the matter was resolved. Then, with a weary nod to Jory, he retreated to his solar. Once alone, he let out a breath. The day's efforts had revealed little of immediate consequence. He walked to the window. The sky glowed with the last streaks of sunset, pink and gold banding across the horizon. King's Landing buzzed below, a symphony of commerce and laughter and quiet malice. Ned found himself wondering if Baelish might be laughing somewhere in the afterlife at the chaos he left behind. The Mockingbird's presence was gone in body, but not in spirit. Perhaps that was Baelish's final victory. 1,000 small conspiracies still hatching because of him, forcing those who remained to grapple with the fallout. Ned thought of Winterfell, of the ancient weirwoods and the chill wind that carried the scent of pine and snow. How simple life had seemed there, governed by the old gods, and the quiet resilience of northern folk. He remembered looking upon Bran's eager face, bright with curiosity, and Rickon's tiny hands clutching a wooden sword. Now, his family was scattered, his wife away, Sansa torn by the illusions of courtly romance, Arya forced to guard her own innocence with steel. He shut his eyes, feeling the ache of longing for home, and the cold knowledge that he was as tangled in the capital's trials as any man had ever been. After a time, he took a seat by the table where the coded records lay. Slowly, methodically, he began to compare the times, cross-checking them against known arrivals and departures at the Red Keep. Each entry was another chance to pry open a secret that might save or doom the realm. The candle burned low, and the night grew deep, but Ned Stark did not stop. If he could do nothing else, he would honor the duty he had undertaken, to rid King's Landing of the echoes of treason that still whispered in its halls. Long after midnight, when the final candle sputtered and failed, Ned finally relented, massaging his bleary eyes. 1,000 questions lurked behind the darkness. He could only hope that step by step, day by day, he might lay Baelish's schemes to rest. And yet, in the silence of his chamber, he could not help but feel that the mockingbird had flown beyond his reach, leaving behind the faint echo of laughter, an echo that would haunt the 7 kingdoms long after the echoer's head parted from his body. The next morning brought a haze of pale sunlight to King's Landing, a light that tried and failed to banish the shadows lurking in the corners of the Red Keep. Ned rose with an ache in his back and a simmering headache behind his eyes, weariness dragging at his every movement. Upon splashing water on his face, he felt only marginally more alert. Each day added fresh layers to the burdens he already carried. And still there was no resolution. He gathered Jory and 2 of his other guards, then made his way to the royal stables. A brisk ride outside the city walls seemed the only way to clear his head. He had a notion to visit the fields beyond the Blackwater, to speak with the farmers who supplied the crown, some of whom had been paid in coin rumored to come from Baelish's illicit coffers. If these small folk had information or rumors, it might offer another piece to the puzzle. They set out mid-morning, slipping through the mud gate and across the busy throng of fishmongers and carters. The city's pungent smells gave way to open air. Here, the farmland stretched in gently rolling hills, dotted with small cottages and wind-twisted trees. The sky was blue but thin, the sun's warmth tempered by a breeze that stirred the tall grasses. As Ned guided his horse along the dirt roads, he felt the tension in his neck ease, just a little. The countryside reminded him of simpler truths. Tilled earth, families at labor, the quiet cycles of sowing and harvesting. All of it felt far from the swirl of conspiracies. Their first stop was a small holdfast belonging to a farmer named Torek, a wiry man of middling years who bowed deeply when the hand of the king arrived. Torek's wife hovered in the doorway, watchful and wary. Children darted behind her skirts, shy of the mounted men. Ned dismounted and approached on foot, hands raised in a sign of goodwill. No matter how urgent his errand, he would not loom over them on horseback like some domineering lord. Torek led them to a rough-hewn table outside his cottage. A battered jug of small ale was offered in hospitality. Ned thanked him and took a seat, ignoring the creak of the old bench. Jory and the other guards remained standing at a polite distance, scanning the horizon. Ned began gently. "Your farm provides grain and eggs to the crown stores, yes? Can you tell me what you've observed these last few weeks? Have any new men appeared here, claiming the city owed them coin, or offering strange bargains?" "No." Torek glanced at his wife, then slowly nodded. "Aye, Lord Hand. 2 men rode through not a fortnight past, told me they'd pay double for my next wagon of barley if I delivered it to a warehouse near the Dragon Gate. They said it was on behalf of the crown, but they wore no sigil, had no official paper. Didn't seem quite right, if you take my meaning." Ned exchanged a look with Jory. Did they give names, or mention whose gold they carried? Torek shook his head. "No proper names. The taller one claimed the Master of Coin had arranged it. But I told them as how the Master of Coin was dead. They laughed and said there's always a new man with a purse in King's Landing. Never you fear. They left soon after. I had no mind to do business with strangers." Ned ran a thumb along the weathered tabletop. "Damn, you did well to refuse. If they come again, let me or my men know at once. Such dealings might be linked to Baelish's old networks." Torek grunted, the lines on his face drawn tight. "I'll do so, my lord. Times are lean enough without dancing with devils." Ned thanked him, left a small pouch of silver in appreciation, and departed. They repeated similar visits at 2 other outlying farms, and found variations of the same story. Roving men who claimed the city still needed grain or produce, promising higher payment, hinting that these offers were backed by someone eager to fill the void Baelish's death had created. Perhaps it was a cunning opportunist or a group of them, tying to Baelish's leftover funds or forging new ways to skim coin from the crown's supplies. Returning through the city gates near dusk, Ned contemplated the matter. Whoever these men were, they seemed to be replicating Baelish's methods: misdirection, secrecy, false promises of official sanction. The farmland visits had confirmed one truth: treachery did not die with Petyr Baelish. Someone sought to exploit the chaos he left behind. It might be a single puppet master, or a dozen men each hoping to seize a portion of Baelish's old dominion. Ned felt a cold frustration, sensing how easily a city like King's Landing could nurture such schemes. They stabled their horses inside the Red Keep and parted ways. Ned instructed Jory to coordinate with the Goldcloaks who patrolled the roads outside the walls. He wanted them alert, with instructions to question any traveling parties that claimed crown authority without proper papers. Then, exhausted but determined, he climbed the stone steps to his solar. A pile of fresh parchment awaited him. Letters, messages, updates from various officials. With a resigned sigh, he settled in to read. The first few scrolls outlined the ongoing confusion within the crown's accounts. One letter was from Renly Baratheon, detailing how the scribe he'd chosen to manage the vacant Master of Coin seat had run into multiple obstacles. Money traced to front companies that never existed, or trade deals that contradicted the official ledgers. Each puzzle pointed back to Baelish, as if the man had deliberately built labyrinth upon labyrinth. Another parchment bore the wax seal of Grand Maester Petyr. His trembling handwriting requested Ned's presence for a private matter of grave importance. Ned frowned. Petyr was rarely direct. Whatever spurred him to write so urgently must be pressing. Setting that scroll aside, Ned continued through the rest, but his thoughts circled back to Petyr's summons. When the hour grew late, Ned decided to see the Maester in the morning. Fatigue had become his ever-present companion, and tonight he lacked the strength to navigate further intrigue. He took a simple supper, alone, letting the quiet of his room wrap around him. Afterward, he climbed into bed. Though his mind churned with questions, sleep claimed him as soon as he closed his eyes, dragging him down into dark, dreamless rest. Before dawn the next day, Ned rose, dressed, and made his way to Petyr's quarters. The hallway to the Grand Maester's chambers smelled of must and old parchment, the torches burning with a subdued crackle. 2 Lannister guards stood by the door, an odd sight that made Ned raise an eyebrow. He had never known Petyr to require personal Lannister protection. Yet the guards said nothing, only watched with blank expressions as Ned knocked and entered at the muffled invitation from within. Grand Maester Petyr sat at a large oak table, the surface cluttered with scrolls, vials of powders, and a half-finished pot of tea. He was hunched forward, spectacles perched on his hooked nose, and his white whiskers draped down his chest. He looked up with a tremulous smile. "Lord Hand," he greeted, voice quavering, "forgive the early hour, but I felt this matter could not wait." Ned inclined his head, crossing the room. "What is so pressing, Grand Maester?" Petyr gestured to a parchment lying near his elbow. "I've received an unmarked letter delivered by a boy in the night." The wax seal bore no sigil, merely a mockingbird pressed into the wax. A mockery of Lord Baelish's sign, or possibly a leftover stash of seals he used. "You must understand, Lord Stark, that upon seeing it, I nearly threw it in the fire for fear it contained some poison or vile enchantment, but my curiosity overcame me. The letter suggests knowledge of certain personal matters involving the Queen's father, Lord Tywin, and his secret dealings in the Stepstones." "NMT." Ned stiffened. "The Stepstones? That's a precarious region of islands often plagued by pirates. If Lord Tywin is meddling there, it could be for trade routes or a private navy." "No." Petyr nodded, visibly agitated. "The letter implies that Tywin Lannister struck deals with a corsair named San, some Lyseni Selsail, who occasionally reversed the coast. The letter states that gold changed hands, so the corsair would cause trouble for ships bearing certain sigils, House Redwine among others, and thus hamper trade that threatened Lannister interests. This is grave news, if true. Ned exhaled slowly. And you believe this letter's claims? Pycelle adjusted his spectacles. I cannot say. But the writer urges that these records exist within Baelish's hidden vaults. That if we look in the correct place, we'll find contracts or letters of credit implicating Tywin. The question remains, is this an authentic lead, or a trick meant to sow strife between the crown and the Lannisters? Ned considered the possibilities. Baelish certainly had reason to play Lannister and Tyrell against each other, or to stoke conflict with House Redwyne. He thrived on chaos. Even after his death, someone might be using the Mockingbird seal to spread illusions. He tapped the table, thoughts racing. On the other hand, Baelish could have discovered genuine dealings by Tywin and intended to use them as blackmail. Now, the knowledge might have surfaced through an ally or an enemy. Pycelle's throat worked as he swallowed. I hesitate to bring this to you, Lord Stark, for it concerns House Lannister, and I know the Queen is not fond of you. Yet my vow as Grand Maester is to the realm's well-being. If Tywin has conspired with pirates to undermine certain lords, it could spark open war once the truth is revealed. Ned nodded slowly. You did right to inform me. I'll treat this cautiously. He thought about Cersei's possible reaction. She might deny everything, or she might call for Pycelle's head for daring to question her father's honor. Thank you, Grand Maester. Keep this letter to yourself. I'll see what I can learn from the archives recovered at Baelish's manse. Perhaps a coded ledger or contract might confirm or refute these claims. Pycelle let out a shaky breath, relief warring with anxiety in his eyes. Yes, my lord. I trust in your discretion. Ned tucked the letter away, then made a curt bow and left the room. Outside, the Lannister guards stared at him impassively. He wondered what they knew, or what they suspected. As he strode down the hallway, he felt his pulse quickening. Confronting Tywin Lannister was no small matter. If the rumors were false, it could make an enemy of House Lannister. If true, the ramifications were enormous. Tywin was too powerful a lord to challenge lightly, yet the realm's justice demanded that he at least investigate. When he reached his solar, Ned found it difficult to focus on the usual tasks, his mind drawn repeatedly to the letter. He had grown accustomed to Baelish's name cropping up in every scandal of coin or corruption. But piracy and sabotage of major houses was on another scale. He summoned Varys, instructing the guards to admit him without delay. While he waited, he paced the floor, restless. When the spy master arrived, he was as calm and unruffled as ever, wearing a flowing robe of pale green that made him look like a gently drifting leaf. Lord Stark, you appear troubled. How may I assist? Ned wasted no time. I've come into possession of a letter that suggests Tywin Lannister paid a corsair to harass ships from the Arbor and the Reach. The letter is sealed with a Mockingbird insignia. Do you know anything of it? Varys' lips parted slightly, an expression of mild surprise. Piracy. That is an audacious claim. Lord Tywin rarely risks open scandal. He prefers more lawful displays of power. Yet I cannot say it's impossible. The man's cunning is legendary. Ned unclenched his jaw. The letter implies that Baelish uncovered evidence of these dealings, perhaps as leverage against Tywin. If it exists, we must find it. Neither one. Varys' eyes flickered. Yes, indeed. Baelish's hidden records are extensive, and they remain only half-sorted. My scribes labor day and night. Any mention of the Stepstones or a Lyseni corsair named Son would stand out, I think. Ned gave a slow nod. I want them to redouble their efforts. Focus specifically on references to that region. Bring me anything that might connect Tywin Lannister to the Stepstones. And keep this quiet. I don't want the Queen learning of it prematurely. Varys tilted his head in acquiescence. I'll do what I can, my lord. But be wary. If there is truth in these rumors, you risk earning Tywin's wrath. If they are lies, you risk humiliating the Lannisters for nothing. In King's Landing, caution is often the better part of valor. Nah. Ned raked a hand through his hair. I understand, but I must see it through. If treason or sabotage poisons the realm, The hand cannot turn a blind eye. Varys offered him a shallow bow. You are admirably steadfast, Lord Stark. I shall do my part. When Varys departed, Ned sank into the chair behind his desk. He felt more deeply tangled with each day, as if trying to sever a single strand of Baelish's schemes only led to 10 new threads. Who else had Baelish blackmailed with knowledge of such weight? If House Lannister was compromised, the entire power structure of the Seven Kingdoms might shift, especially if Mace Tyrell or the Redwynes demanded retribution for losses at sea. A faint knock at the door interrupted his grim thoughts. Sansa slipped in, her expression solemn. "Father, I was told you were busy, but I wanted to ask if..." She paused, noticing his tense features. "Is something wrong?" Ned softened, motioning for her to approach. "Just more business of the realm, Sansa. Nothing you need trouble yourself with." She drew closer, smoothing her light green skirts nervously. "I see. I only wanted to request if I might attend the hawking party Princess Myrcella is hosting. It's to be at the meadows past the Roserod, with septas and some noble ladies in attendance. I thought it might be a pleasant afternoon." He studied her face, noting the hopeful glimmer. Sansa had endured enough gloom. Perhaps this simple outing could distract her from the city's dark realities. "If there's proper supervision and the king has granted permission, you may go." Her eyes lit with gratitude. "Thank you, Father. Arya won't be attending. She hates hawking. But I'd like to see the falcons in flight." She hesitated, biting her lip. "I won't wander alone." Ned managed a small smile. "See that you don't. Enjoy your day and be cautious. These gatherings sometimes breed gossip as fierce as any hawk." She gave a quick curtsy and left, her step lighter than before. Ned watched the door close, feeling a pang of tenderness mingled with worry. Even in these uncertain times, his children deserved moments of normalcy. He refused to let the city's schemers rob them of every joy. The following days blurred into a cycle of searching, cross-referencing, and discreet interviews. Varys' scribes unearthed references to shipping lanes in the Narrow Sea, coded ledgers that included sums paid to a Summer Island broker for unspecified services. Though intriguing, these didn't quite match the Stepstones rumor. Ned pressed further, dividing the found documents into sections for more efficient analysis. One afternoon, while sifting through a trunk of scrolls, he found an old parchment bearing the imprint of House Hightower. Carefully scanning it, he realized it was a charter for cargo ships traveling to Old Town, scrawled over with Littlefinger's cramped marginalia, notes about alternative ports, discrete cargo limits, and a sigil sketched in the margin that looked suspiciously like the red lion of the Lannisters, reversed in black ink. It might be nothing more than idle scribbles, or it might be another thread. Ned brought the parchment to Varys, who studied it with interest, tracing the symbol with a fingertip. "I suspect these black lion drawings were Baelish's personal code for some subcontract arrangement. The question is whether it ties to Tywin's rumored dealings." They continued to search. Each new day felt like a fresh roll of the dice, uncertain whether they would discover the crucial clue or stumble into a snare set by Baelish's unknown heirs. Ned's eyes stung from candlelit reading, and each morning he woke with a deeper fatigue. The king, in his usual manner, demanded hunts, feasts, and easy amusements. Robert spared little thought for leftover conspiracies. The queen, on the other hand, seemed suspiciously calm, drifting about the halls as though she expected developments he was perfectly prepared to counter. Whenever Ned passed her, he felt her cool green gaze linger on him, and he wondered how much she already knew. After a full week of searching, frustration set in. The alleged Stepstones connection remained elusive. The corsair, named San, was nowhere mentioned in the partial logs. Ned feared the letter was a diversion, crafted to send him chasing false leads. Still, something gnawed at his instincts, whispering that this was no mere hoax. On the 8th day, near sundown, Jory came to Ned's solar with an anxious look. "My lord, we've caught a man trying to slip out of the Red Keep with stolen documents. He calls himself Kelvis, claims to be a clerk under the crown's pay. But we searched him, and he's carrying scrolls listing ships, names, ports. The sigils for House Redwyne and House Lannister are on the same page. Thought you'd want to see it." "Memony." Ned stood so abruptly the leg of his chair screeched. "Where is he?" "In the dungeons, under guard. Bring the documents to me now, and I'll question him after." Jory hurried away, returning moments later with a small sheaf of parchment. Ned's pulse thrummed as he spread them out on his desk. The first page listed a series of ciphers, pairs of letters that might denote shipments or payments. The next page bore a rough map of the narrow sea, lines connecting Lannisport to an island chain that looked suspiciously like the Stepstones. A scribbled annotation read, "Sans guarantee. Safe passage withheld from RER." RR almost certainly meant Redwine Reach, a reference to ships from the Arbor or that broad southwestern region. Ned's heart pounded. This was the first tangible piece linking Tywin to the rumored pirate plot, assuming it was genuine. He sank into his chair, scanning the lines of half-coded scribbles. Cargo to be seized, no casualties to reflect arrangement, and Lord to pay balance upon proof. A wave of grim realization welled up. If these words meant what they seemed to, Tywin might have paid this corsair, Salad Horsan, to seize or harass certain vessels from the Redwines, weakening their shipping power. It was a ploy that only a cunning, ruthless lord would make, one that Baelish must have discovered and noted. The question now was how much Tywin had truly orchestrated, and whether he had done so with the king's knowledge or behind the crown's back. Ned suspected the latter. His mind whirled with implications. If Mace Tyrell or the Redwines learned that Lannister gold funded pirates against them, it could incite open conflict. But the realm was already precariously balanced, with Robert's uncertain leadership and the crown's debt. Ned shuddered to think what might happen if the truth erupted publicly. War could ignite from the smallest spark in a land as tinder-dry with old grudges as the Seven Kingdoms. Jory stood by, watching Ned process the documents. Ned looked up. "Well done catching this thief. He must have rummaged through Baelish's trove, seeking to smuggle out these records. Kelvis insisted he was only retrieving them on orders from the king, but we asked around. Nobody in the royal staff recognized his name. I suspect he was working for someone else." Ned felt a pang of dread. "Most likely. Keep him locked up. I'll speak with him soon. For now, let's secure these documents in my personal chest. No eyes but ours." Nastramind. Once he had the scrolls locked away, Ned descended to the dungeons, accompanied by Jory and a pair of gold cloaks. The air below was stale, thick with the stink of mold and unwashed bodies. Torchlight flickered on slick walls. Kelvis sat in a cramped cell, face bruised from his struggle with the guards. He looked up warily, flinching when Ned approached. Ned wasted no ceremony. "You stole from the crown. Who do you serve?" Kelvis spat on the floor. "I serve the realm. Those documents, someone needed to act on them. You lot are so slow. They're important." And Ned's temper flared. "Important enough for you to smuggle them out under false pretenses. I don't believe you. Who paid you?" Kelvis' eyes darted about, sweat beading on his forehead. "No one. I was going to sell them, if you must know. A man in Flea Bottom offered gold for any old records from the Master of Coin's stash. I found these and thought they'd fetch a good price. That's all. Swear it." Ned studied the man's trembling posture. A common thief might well do such a thing. Yet the nature of the documents suggested a buyer with very particular interests. Who was this man? Kelvis shrugged desperately. "He never gave a name. Met him in a dingy tavern, cloaked and hooded. He told me, if you find anything that ties great lords to shady dealings, bring it to me. I'll pay double your weight in silver. So I rummaged, found those scrolls in a crate of rubbish. Then your gold cloaks nabbed me." Ned sensed half-truths. "And you didn't question what use a cloaked stranger in Flea Bottom would have for blackmail-worthy documents?" Kelvis' eyes flicked to Jory, then back to Ned. "He was paying well. I needed no more reason." Ned nodded to one of the guards, who rapped a baton against the cell bars. Kelvis flinched, sinking back. "You'll remain here," Ned said, "until we learn the truth. If you recall anything more about that buyer, his voice, his accent, any detail, tell us or you'll regret it." Leaving Kelvis behind, Ned felt frustration roll through him. Who else might be scouring the city for these records? Any number of lords or factions could be behind it. The Tyrells might wish to confirm rumors. The Lannisters might want to destroy incriminating evidence. Or a third party, Varys, or even foreign powers, could be stirring the pot. Ned's sense of security frayed further. He returned to his solar, the stolen scrolls locked in his chest. As he sat there, hands pressed to his temples, he wondered how to proceed. If he confronted Tywin with vague accusations, Tywin would deny everything. If Ned took this to Robert, the king might dismiss it as nonsense, or worse, complain that Ned was harping on trifles. Another path would be to inform Mace Tyrell or the Redwynes, but that carried grave risks for the realm's stability. He wished fervently that Jon Arryn, the former Hand, were still alive to advise him, or that Catelyn might be near to offer her counsel. Instead, he had only his conscience and a city full of watchers waiting for him to make a misstep. Despite the swirling doubts, Ned drafted a coded letter that evening, addressed to Catelyn in the north, carefully outlining the broad strokes. Baelish's leftover conspiracies, the possibility of Lannister involvement in Stepstone's piracy, the continuing sense that more threats lurked in the capital. He did not name Tywin outright, but implied that a powerful lord was implicated. He intended to send it by a trusted courier at first light. At least Cat would know the dangers he faced, even if she could offer him no direct help from so far away. Night deepened and Ned found little rest again, his dreams filled with images of roiling seas, black-sailed ships bearing a snarling lion crest, and Baelish's mockingbird perched on the prow, cackling in the wind. He woke in a cold sweat, the flicker of a dying candle his only companion. The next morning, he resolved to see how well he could guard this discovery. He assigned his most loyal men to watch over Baelish's archives, controlling who came and went. He quietly ordered them to detain any suspicious figures they found lurking near the records. Then, armed with the knowledge gleaned from the scrolls, Ned paid a visit to the king. He found Robert in the training yard, leaning against a fence post, while Sir Barristan Selmy led a group of young knights in a series of drills. The king was unarmored, wearing only a sweat-stained tunic, his hair plastered to his forehead. Judging by the empties strewn about, he had been drinking in the sun. Even so, his voice boomed when Ned approached. "Ned, come to have a bout with these pups?" "They're far too careful, if you ask me." Ned shook his head. "I have matters of state, your grace." Robert groaned, pushing himself upright. "Always matters of state. Fine, let's hear it. Barristan, carry on." They moved to the edge of the yard, away from curious ears. Ned spoke quietly. "I have reason to believe there's been clandestine interference with certain ships from the Arbor, potentially orchestrated by a powerful lord to weaken House Redwyne's trade. It stems from records belonging to Petyr Baelish. It could be..." He paused, uncertain how to phrase this delicately. "It might involve Lord Tywin's gold." Robert's brows shot up. Tywin's gold? Gods, that man's pockets run deeper than the sea itself. "What in the seven hells do you mean, Ned?" Ned tried to keep his tone even. "There's evidence that a corsair named Saladhor Saan was paid to attack or harass Redwyne ships, possibly at Tywin's behest. We haven't confirmed it fully, but the records suggest these dealings were uncovered by Baelish." Robert's scowl deepened. "Tywin is many things, but do you think he's fool enough to risk open scandal by hiring pirates? And why the Redwynes? House Redwyne is closely allied with House Tyrell. Perhaps Tywin saw advantage in undermining them," Ned said, aware this explanation might sound feeble to the king's ears. If Tywin wanted to hamper the Tyrells or their allies, messing with Redwyne trade routes would be a start. The king took a swig from a water skin one of his squires handed him. Sweat trickled down his brow. "Bloody cunning if true. But I don't see the point in stirring that hornet's nest. Tyrells are arrogant enough without them suspecting sabotage. Could lead to war. The realm can't afford war, not while I'm up to my eyeballs in debt." "That is precisely why we must tread carefully," Ned said. "But if it's true, we cannot ignore it. Tywin might be gambling on your reluctance to challenge him. Or it could be some ruse Baelish left behind to sow distrust between the crown and the Lannisters." Robert wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "I trust Tywin about as far as I can throw him. But start flinging accusations, and the Queen will be in my ear every waking moment." We'd have the Westerlands up in arms, and I don't need that headache." He pressed fingers to his temples, face twisted with frustration. "Find out for certain, Ned. If it's just Baelish's usual bullshit, burn it. If it's true, we'll deal with it quietly. The last thing I want is the Tyrells charging up to King's Landing demanding Tywin's head." Ned bowed. "I'll continue the investigation, Your Grace. I needed you aware." Robert grunted, then thrust the water skin into Ned's hand. "Take a drink, you look parched with worry." "Gods know I'd rather be hunting boars than playing cat and mouse with Tywin." He let out a rueful laugh. "You're a good man, Ned. Too good for this place. But do what must be done. Just don't let it become a scandal." Ned drank, the cool water easing the dryness in his throat, but not the tension in his chest. "As you wish, Your Grace." Robert clapped him on the shoulder. "Now leave me to watch these green boys try to handle a sword. Reminds me of simpler days." He turned away, calling to Sir Barristan, while Ned retreated, knowing he had the king's reluctant support, for what little it was worth. The real threat loomed in the shape of Tywin, a man who never forgot a slight, nor forgave a challenge. That evening, in the privacy of his solar, Ned sifted anew through the incriminating scrolls. The line, "Saint's Guarantee, safe passage withheld from RE," glared at him. He considered reaching out to Salad Horsan directly, perhaps via Raven to the Stepstones. But the risk of tipping off Tywin was high. San was reputed to be wily. If he sensed the crown's scrutiny, he might vanish or worse, inform Tywin that the secret was out. There was another route, the Redwynes themselves. They might have logs of lost ships, or rumors from sailors who survived pirate attacks. If Ned could gather direct testimony that their vessels were specifically targeted by Lyseni corsairs avoiding Lannister craft, the puzzle would all but confirm itself. Yet contacting the Redwynes without raising suspicion was tricky. They were close to Mace Tyrell, father of Margaery, a man who relished big gestures and bigger grudges. Still, it might be the only way to verify the truth. He took parchment and quill and started drafting a coded letter to Lord Paxter Redwyne, the head of House Redwyne. He couched his questions in vague terms about shipping lanes in the Narrow Sea, requesting any records of unusual pirate activity in the last year. He wrote that it was part of an inquiry into Baelish's financial manipulations. Hopefully, Redwyne would respond with details that could be matched to the stolen scrolls. Once done, Ned sealed it with wax, pressing the direwolf of House Stark. He would dispatch it at dawn with a trusted messenger. Sleep eluded him once more. The next morning, Ned felt the dark circles under his eyes deepen as he sealed the letter for Redwyne. Outside, the castle courtyard was alive with noise. The king was riding out for a short hunt, his retinue of lords, chattering horses, stamping on cobblestone. Ned watched from a window as Robert laughed with Sir Barristan. Joffrey paraded around in gilded armor. Preening, Sansa stood with a cluster of ladies in waiting, fanning themselves in the blossoming heat. Arya was nowhere to be seen, likely training with Syrio or exploring one of the keep's forgotten corridors. When the king and his party thundered away, Ned made for the main library, a lofty chamber that once housed the records of King Aerys Targaryen, before Robert's rebellion. It was quieter now, though the faint scent of old parchment and leather bindings still lingered. 4 scribes in crown livery worked at long wooden desks, copying or translating segments of Baelish's trove. Varys hovered in the corner, conferring with a tall young scribe who wore spectacles. Ned approached, and Varys inclined his head. "My lord Hand." Another day in the labyrinth. Ned's gaze flicked to the piles of scrolls. "Have we found anything more related to the Stepstones or to a sell-sale named San?" Varys tapped a thin ledger on the desk. "This might be relevant. Written in a mixture of Braavosi dialect and Westerosi script, it mentions certain cooperative captains near the Stepstones. One name stands out. Salad, possibly shorthand for Salad Horsan. Unfortunately, the text is heavily abbreviated. We can't be certain." "Many." Ned nodded, reaching for the ledger. He flipped pages, scanning the scrawled lines. The Braavosi script was half familiar from old lessons. One entry read, "Salad, paid partial, ships harassed, payment due upon results, L continue to guarantee." That single letter L was heavily emphasized, scrawled in bolder ink. Ned's pulse quickened. It might stand for Lannister. It might stand for Lys, or something else entirely. But he doubted it was a coincidence. He thanked Varys for the discovery. This ledger, combined with the stolen scrolls, painted a damning picture. Enough for Ned to suspect that Tywin, or an agent of his, had arranged a deal with Salladhor Saan to harass Redwine shipping. The partial payment, the expectation of more gold to come. Baelish had somehow noted all of it, perhaps planning to blackmail Tywin if ever he needed to. Now that secret was in Ned's hands. Yet, how to use it? He could present it to Robert, who had explicitly said to confirm before accusing Tywin. Or perhaps he should approach Tywin discreetly and see how the man reacted. Though that was dangerous. Tywin might strike preemptively. Alternatively, he could simply do as Robert hinted, bury it. Let it be a quiet secret, and avoid the chaos that might follow. But that went against everything Ned Stark believed. A realm rotted from within if men of power could buy pirates to do their bidding with impunity. By late afternoon he'd made his decision. He could not, in good conscience, hide the truth. Not if it risked open conflict down the line. Best to corner Tywin with enough evidence that the man could not deny it, then work toward a resolution that kept the peace. In private, if possible. If Tywin threatened reprisal, Ned would stand firm, King's authority at his back. Yet that demanded a direct meeting. Tywin was not in King's Landing at present. He often remained in the Westerlands unless summoned. Ned might have to send a raven or request Tywin's immediate audience. The notion filled him with dread. Summoning the Lord of Casterly Rock as if he were a mere bannerman might provoke him. He weighed the options. Days slipped by. No immediate letter arrived from Paxter Redwine in response to Ned's inquiries, which he expected. Old Town or the Arbor was far by Raven, and Lord Redwine might need time to gather records. Meanwhile, the city churned with idle gossip. Some courtiers speculated that Ned was still hunting Baelish's hidden gold. Others whispered that Ned had discovered unspeakable secrets about half the lords in Westeros. The latter was not far from the mark. He noticed the Queen's Watchers trailing him more frequently, men with the Lannister lion on their chests, lurking around corners. One sultry evening, as Ned returned late from the library, he rounded a corner and nearly collided with the Queen herself. Cersei wore a deep green gown embroidered with gold thread. Her hair twisted in a glossy coil, and her perfume hung heavy in the corridor. Her lips curved in a smile that did not reach her emerald eyes. "My Lord Hand," she greeted, voice cool. "You work too hard. One might think you harbor a secret passion for dusty scrolls." Ned inclined his head stiffly. "I serve the realm's interests. The crown's finances are in a tangle. I aim to correct it." "No." She took a single step closer, forcing him to either retreat or stand uncomfortably near. He stood his ground. "Yes," she said, "I've heard. They say you labor day and night, searching for ghosts of Baelish's treacheries. I hope, for your sake, you don't chase illusions. Men who stare too long into shadows often see shapes that aren't there." Her gaze was direct, challenging him to declare his suspicions about Tywin. Ned kept his expression neutral. "I'll see the realm's coffers set right, no matter what shadows I must chase. If I find illusions, I'll banish them. If I find truths, I'll bring them to the king. That is my duty." "Mensch me." Cersei's smile hardened. "Of course, you are a dutiful man, Eddard Stark." She paused, letting the silence spool into tension. "But King's Landing can be dangerous for those who dig up old bones. Sometimes it's kinder to let them stay buried. You understand me, I trust." Ned's mouth felt dry. He measured his response carefully. "I understand many things, Your Grace, including my responsibilities. I will not forsake them." She drew back slightly, tilting her chin in a gesture of regal dismissal. "Then I wish you well. I pray you don't find the burden too heavy." She glided past him, trailing perfume, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Ned stood still for a long moment, jaw clenched, anger pulsing in his temples. The Queen's warning was not subtle. She suspected what he'd uncovered, whether she knew the full extent. Tywin's alleged pirate dealings remained uncertain, but she clearly wanted him to step back, to bury any damning evidence. He steeled himself, repeating an old truth. The stark words, "Winter is coming," meant one must act with integrity in the face of harsh realities. He could not ignore wrongdoing for political convenience, yet her threat lingered like a blade at his throat. He resumed his walk, each footstep echoing hollowly on the stone. If the Queen wanted him intimidated, she might soon try more direct measures. He reached his chambers, locked the door behind him, and leaned against it, exhaling a long breath. He felt alone and embattled. Even Robert, for all their friendship, disliked stirring trouble with Tywin. Midnight found him poring over the incriminating ledger again, the flicker of candlelight reflecting in his eyes. If the Queen believed she could dissuade him through hints of danger, she was mistaken. He told himself that repeatedly. Yet in the pit of his stomach, he knew every step he took along this path increased his peril, and possibly that of his daughters. He thought of Arya's unwavering spirit, her quick grin, her stubborn devotion to the sword lessons that gave her confidence in this hostile city. He thought of Sansa's delicate hopes, her illusions about gallant knights and graceful ladies, illusions so easily shattered by the capital's treachery. Their fates bound him as tightly as any vow. He must protect them, even if it meant confronting Tywin in the shadows rather than on a public stage. At length he closed the ledger and placed it in a wooden chest he locked with an iron key. He laid the key beneath his pillow, though he doubted that flimsy precaution would thwart the Queen's men if they truly came for it. Tiredness clung to his bones. He sank onto the bed, wanting only a few hours' rest before the city demanded his presence once more. In the morning, he awoke to pounding on his door. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, he opened it to find Jory Castle standing there, face pale. "My lord," Jory began, voice tight. "There's been an incident." Ned stiffened. "What sort of incident?" "Last night someone broke into the locked storeroom where we kept a portion of Baelish's documents. Most have been ransacked, possibly burned, pages scattered. It's a mess." Ned felt a surge of alarm. "Were there guards posted?" Jory nodded grimly. "2 men. They were found unconscious. Someone used a poison or drug. No permanent harm, but they slept through everything. Whoever did this was professional." A coldness seeped into Ned's stomach. "So they destroyed documents that might incriminate them, or gleaned what they needed and burned the rest to hide the theft. Did they take anything else?" "Hard to say," Jory replied. "The place is in chaos. The scribes are trying to figure out what's missing. Could be they took everything about the Stepstones or Tywin, but we can't be certain yet." Ned's fists clenched at his sides. So the Queen, or Tywin's agents, had struck first. If they knew how close he was to exposing the truth, they must have decided to hamper him. At least the most damning evidence, the stolen scrolls and the ledger, were safe in Ned's personal chest, guarded by his men. But how long before they tried to get to that as well? He followed Jory to the storeroom, finding in shambles. Shelves overturned, crates smashed, papers strewn and singed. Several had been tossed into a brazier. A bitter tang of burnt parchment hung in the air. One of the scribes stood by, wringing his hands. They took the index, all the references that tracked which files were located where, the scribe lamented. Voice quavering. "We'll have to reconstruct from memory if we can." Ned felt a spike of fury. This was no random theft. Someone had targeted the best tool they possessed for systematically sorting Baelish's labyrinth. Now everything was undone. He forced himself to remain calm, kneeling to pick up a half-burnt fragment of paper. The words were unreadable. A single letter survived. He rose, scanning the debris. "Post more guards. No one enters without my written leave. Get the scribes to salvage what they can. Start the indexing again. We cannot let this stop us." The scribe nodded hastily, eyes wide. Jory dispatched men to stand outside. Ned walked away, mind churning. With the storeroom compromised, the final puzzle pieces would be harder to find. And someone wanted them beyond his reach. The question now was whether to retaliate in some fashion or keep pushing forward quietly. If he stormed to the Queen, brandishing accusations, she would feign ignorance, or accuse him of paranoia. If he approached the king, Robert might grumble and shrug. Ned's anger warred with caution. He paused in a corridor, leaning a hand against the cool stone, letting the swirl of frustration and dread settle. At least he had the crucial pieces locked away safely. The ledger referencing San, the stolen scroll mapping pirate attacks, the partial coded logs. That evidence would have to suffice. He could not rely on finding more. By the time midday arrived, Ned had calmed enough to think clearly. He decided to request a private audience with the Queen, a final attempt at reason. If she was behind this sabotage, confronting her might coax a response that revealed how far she'd go. If not, perhaps she could be made to see that burying Tywin's secret was a threat to the realm's stability. Part of him knew it was a slender hope. He sent a steward to the Queen's apartments with a polite note. The steward returned with word that Cersei would see him that evening, in her solar, once the king had retired. Ned felt tension coil in his stomach. An after-dark meeting with the Queen behind closed doors. It was a risk. But the alternative, letting the sabotage continue unchallenged, was worse. The sun began to sink, staining the rooftops gold. Ned took a light meal, then gave instructions to Jory. He explained where the ledger and scrolls were hidden, and that if he did not return, they must be safeguarded at all costs. Jory looked alarmed, but nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity. A swirl of uneasy anticipation filled the Red Keep's corridors as Ned made his way to the Queen's quarters. He was admitted by a maid who said not a word, only curtsied and led him through a door into a spacious, luxuriously appointed room. Cersei stood by a table set with wine and flickering candles, her gown a shimmering gold that matched her hair. Her expression was guarded. "Lord Stark," she greeted, dismissing the maid with a glance. The door closed softly, leaving them alone. "You wished to speak?" Ned inclined his head, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance. "I did. There's no point in dancing around it, Your Grace. Documents from Baelish's trove indicating House Lannister's involvement with pirates have been discovered. Last night, someone ransacked the storeroom, destroying everything they could. I suspect that was no coincidence." Cersei lifted an eyebrow, though her face remained unreadable. "You presume I ordered such a thing?" Ned didn't back down. "I believe someone loyal to House Lannister did. If not you, then Lord Tywin's agents. The attempt to hide the truth only makes the crown look guiltier." She studied him, then turned to pour wine into 2 goblets. "Drink?" When Ned silently shook his head, she gave a half smile and took a sip from 1 cup herself. "Lord Stark, let me be plain. My father is a proud man who protects the interests of House Lannister above all else. If he acted in ways you deem questionable, it was likely for the good of our family. But do not assume I am ignorant of the realm's well-being. A scandal pitting Lannister against Tyrell might tear the 7 kingdoms apart." "Very well." Ned's gaze hardened. "Then help me ensure it does not. If Lord Tywin truly conspired with a corsair, we must find a resolution that preserves the peace. But covering it up, destroying evidence, that only emboldens future crimes." A flicker of anger crossed her face. "You speak of resolution as though my father were a rebellious bannerman. He's the father of the Queen, the man who financed Robert's war. The realm owes him a debt." "Ben." Ned took a breath to steady his voice. "Gratitude is not a license to commit treason against other lords. Hiring pirates to disrupt shipping is a betrayal of the king's peace." Cersei set her goblet down with a snap. "Treason," she echoed, voice laced with contempt. "It's a malleable word, bandied about far too easily. Men who cling to illusions of honor fail to see the greater game. Baelish learned how to use that word to his advantage, and look where it got him. Headless?" Ned advanced a half step, meeting her gaze directly. "I have no desire to see heads roll, but I will not stand idle while the realm is toyed with. The king has asked me to determine the truth. I have enough proof to link Lord Tywin to these dealings. If he refuses to answer for them, we may face unrest, even war. Then..." She breathed in sharply, color rising in her cheeks. "And what do you propose?" "Shall I write a letter, father? The hand demands an explanation for rumors you hired pirates, He'll laugh and tear it to pieces." Ned's voice dropped. "Then let me address him personally, quietly. If he swears it is false, let him provide another explanation for these documents. If he admits it, we can settle the matter discreetly, with compensation to the Redwynes, a formal apology, some arrangement to avert bloodshed. I do not seek his downfall. I only want to protect the realm." "No." Cersei's eyes flickered with emotion Ned couldn't fully parse. Her next words came out low, almost trembling with repressed fury. "You do realize that if you corner Tywin, he will not yield meekly. He will fight, and the resources of House Lannister are vast. You might put the entire city in jeopardy." Ned's chest tightened. Better to face the threat head-on than let it fester. She looked away, picking up her goblet again, staring into the dark wine. "You are as stubborn as Robert." "No more so. At least Robert can be swayed with wine and flattery. You—" She set the goblet down and turned to him. "Very well. I will write to my father and request he come to King's Landing on a matter of strategic importance. But I warn you, if you press him too hard, he might well choose war over appeasement." Ned forced a measure of calm into his tone. "That will be his choice. All I want is an honest conversation." She gave a brittle laugh. "Honesty is a luxury seldom afforded to those who rule, Lord Stark. But so be it. I will send the raven tomorrow. Do not blame me if the lion shows its claws." He inclined his head. "Thank you, Your Grace. That is all I ask." She studied him a moment longer, the candlelight casting flickering shadows on her face. "One last piece of advice," she said softly. "For your daughter's sake, if not your own, tread lightly. Even kings can be undone by that which they cannot see. Do not provoke my father into becoming your mortal enemy." "Mal." Ned bowed, understanding both the warning and the threat behind it. "I will do my duty. Good night, Your Grace." He turned and left, every muscle taut. The corridor outside felt stifling, as though lacking enough air to breathe. He walked briskly, heading for the solace of his chambers, ignoring the curious stares of passing servants. His heart hammered. So the Queen would write Tywin, presumably urging him to come with haste. No telling how Tywin would respond. Perhaps he'd march with an army, or perhaps he'd arrive with only a small retinue, his cunning tongue in gold at the ready. Either way, the confrontation loomed. When Ned reached his room, he found Arya waiting inside, perched on a chair by the window, arms folded in a sulking posture. She jumped up when he entered. "Father, is it true the library was attacked? One of your guards told me. They said important papers were burned." Ned sighed, weary beyond words. "Yes, it's true. Nothing for you to fret over, just more treachery." Arya's eyes shone with fierce concern. "They keep attacking you through lies and secrets. You should strike back. Fight them openly." He managed a faint, sad smile. "It's not that simple. Fighting with swords is straightforward compared to fighting shadows. But I'm trying to stand firm." She nodded, stepping closer. "When we were in Winterfell, you always said the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Here they pass sentences in secret and never face the blade themselves. It's not right." Ned placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, it's not. But I'll do what I can to see justice done even in a place like this." "Nay." She gazed up at him, and for a moment, he saw all her love and trust shining there. That, more than anything, steeled his resolve. No matter the risk, he would not let corruption go unchallenged. He squeezed her shoulder, letting a gentle warmth flow through that small gesture. "Off to bed," he said softly. "We'll speak in the morning." When Arya left, Ned remained by the window, staring at the gloom of night cloaking the city. Somewhere out there, the Queen's letter would soon summon Tywin Lannister. The dawn would bring fresh uncertainties, fresh threats. Yet he felt no temptation to retreat. He was Eddard Stark, sworn to uphold the realm's justice. If Baelish's schemes had opened a door to greater treacheries, then Ned would walk through that door and face the consequences. And so he stood there until the candle guttered, the darkness embracing him like a silent pledge of what lay ahead. The mockingbird was dead. but the echoes of his cunning still rippled across King's Landing. Now, the lion stirred, and it might well decide to bare its fangs. Ned closed his eyes, whispering a quiet prayer to the old gods for wisdom and strength. Winter might be coming, but he would meet it standing tall.